Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the air-conditioned council chambers. It's a little cooler here. Welcome to the work study session for June 21st, 2018 here in the Harry E. Mitchell Government Center. First call to the audience would be for our work study session. And those items are, let's see here. Well, we actually have the issue review session. It's the Tempe pre-one-year implementation report. We have the proposed expansion of the CAMP, Community Assisted Mortgage Program, the Golf Enterprise Fund update, and the City Council Code of Conduct. And I do have some cards, so I'm just going to take them in the order that I have them. And Miss S, could you please come forward? First off, you're a principal, so I think you can handle it. Oh, is Councilman Granville, you on the phone?
I am. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Welcome. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
My name is Marissa Schneckloth, and do you want my full address? Okay.
Place of residence.
Gilbert, Arizona.
Oh, I'm just kidding.
I know.
I'm teasing you. I'm teasing.
Place of employment, Tempe.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, all right. All right, redemption.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I want to thank you for allowing me the time to speak today. But first, I want to thank you guys. We're very fortunate to work in Tempe as a principal, to have a supportive governing board, but also a city council that we're very collaborative with the entire city on multiple events. And most of you have been in my building in particular to support either the Tempe pre-program or a variety of events that we've had. So thank you. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of the Tempe Elementary School District principals at Scales, Laird, Carminati, Aguilar, Holdeman, Arredondo, Meyer, Rover, Wood, and Getz. Those are the places where we have the Tempe pre-program. I'm going to take a deep breath. I don't know why I'm nervous. I speak all day. Over the course of this past school year, with the implementation of the Tempe pre-program, we've been able to witness the astounding transformation of these students, especially in their social emotional development. The city's investment in early intervention yields long-term benefits for both our children and our community coming from our low socioeconomic families that may have not had the opportunity to attend a Tempe high-quality preschool otherwise. This August, we'll have more children coming prepared for kindergarten. Due to Tempe Pre, all children in Tempe have the opportunity to begin kindergarten ready to meet high expectations and rigorous standards. In addition to the students, their families now have a positive outlook on their child's ability to be successful in the school environment and have been empowered to be an active part of their educational experience as they continue through our schools. People in other communities are recognizing the forward thinking of Tempe and their investment in early intervention. There were preschoolers who began the year screaming and running in the halls as their first exposure to a structured environment. By the end of the year, these same children were walking in line and accessing the instruction. Even fifth grade reading buddies commented at the end of the year of these little ones' social development. This valuable instructional time would have been lost in kindergarten if the Tempe Pre was not available. This spring, a study was published by the Journal of Policy Analysis and Management and found that 8 years after attending a high-quality preschool, such as the Tempe Pre program, students are more likely to perform better in math and more likely to enroll in advanced courses. They were also less likely to be retained at grade. On behalf of the children and families of Tempe, we're asking for your continued support of making early intervention available for the children of Tempe. There are currently 1,144 applications, which may have increased already, for about only 300 spots in these Tempe pre-programs. There's an obvious need and interest in early intervention for the children in Tempe. If it isn't our moral imperative as a community that truly values education to meet this need, then whose is it? As always, you're all more than welcome to visit any of our Tempe pre-program locations to observe the amazing learning and growing happening in these environments. Thank you again for listening, caring, and investing in our children.
Thank you. Next, I have Merrill Darcy. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
And please state your name and place of residence for the record.
My name is Merrill Darcy, and I live in Tempe. And I'm not going to sit down. I'm here about the golf fund, and I have a short statement here. I don't know if you know this, but the state of golf in Arizona and also the United States is one of stagnation and decline. The recent closures of the future demise of Riverview, Rio Salado, Ahwatukee, Glendale, and Karsten are a reminder of the decline. Rolling Hills. This morning at 7:15, there were 30 cars in the parking area. Yesterday at 1 p.m., there were only 8. Only one person was on the driving range. Again, this morning, there were just a few golfers that I could see, maybe 8, maybe 10 on the course. This is a contradiction to sustainability, trip reduction, car dependency, water conservation, and totally non-conforming with the confines of the voter-approved Papago Preserve. My opinion is that Rolling Hills should be repurposed and presents a great opportunity to explore a unique cultural attraction or destination. Aquarium, Science Park, Tempe Arboretum. Demographics are leading to increasing negative participation in golf in general, and a study should be recommended to consolidate all golf operations only to the Ken McDonald facility. This again would perhaps positively combine the Papago Preserve, the Rio Salado with the addition of Rolling Hills, making it a world-class destination. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kim Yaffing-Loza. Please come forward.
Hi, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I'm Kim Gaffney-Loza on Papago Circle. And the reason I'm talking is about the change possibly in the code of conduct for the council. And I'm a little bit concerned. I think this could be fraught if it's not done very particularly, because this is addressing somebody that has been elected by the citizens. And one thing that I always brag on Tempe is the fact that our council and mayor and the staff is so open to the citizenry for ideas and feedback and hearing different issues. So there is a provision right now in the code of conduct for recall, by the citizens if there's something serious. And I know myself, I've had a lot of different jobs and careers because I could never decide what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so I've been in a management position, so I've had to let people go. I've always had to document, and prove allegations in those instances. And I've also been the subject of false allegations when I worked for somebody and was fired probably because I was asking too many questions on his business practices. And in my case, I was already had another job lined up when he fired me. But because he threatened me over not allowing me to get workers' compensation or, for leaving, because he challenged me, I did it. And all kinds of false accusations were made against me, and I had to go before a judge to just, keep my integrity for the allegations that were made against me. And I succeeded. But I had to prove myself that the allegations were false. And so I worry sometimes, if you're doing it with a council, employees have means of getting representation and going through a process. Would you have the same process? One of the other councils I think that were mentioned had a board of citizenry. I would suggest if you do something like that, not only do you have a citizen board, but perhaps you have some kind of an attorney on there and a council member that could give feedback if allegations were made against a council member. And that's my only concern. I'm just worried about how that may progress. And I appreciate the chance to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilman Cubey.
Kim?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say we're not necessarily, we'll move by consensus to refer something to next week's meeting and then to refer it to the ballot. So we're not taking any action. We're not making a decision. It's for the voters to decide. And your points are, good, bad, indifferent, but you'll have that opportunity to weigh in should it be referred to the ballot.
Okay, good. Well, I'm just saying in your wording or however you propose it, you know, when you bring that up. That I'm just being cautionary on that, because it does worry me, because I think it could be fraud if it's not done in a particular way.
Thank you. Next, Darlene Justice. Welcome, Darlene.
Hi, Darlene Justice. I live in Tempe, and I'm here speaking for myself today. And I too have some concerns about the code of conduct. And I realize that you're talking about doing something, but it's not being voted on today in that. The concern is in the packet, they're referring to the employees handbook and things that the employees have to live up to and not do these things. I think that, and I don't know what your real plans are, but if you use that for city council members, I'm concerned, because some of the stuff takes a lot of interpretation and that. And if an employee gets fired and they feel it's unjust, then they can go through all these appeals processes that the city has, which I think that's great. And they also can go before a citizen board if they so choose to. I am concerned that if you try to apply something like that to city council, these are people that are elected. I don't think they'd have the same appeals opportunities in that. If they've done something egregious where it's against the law, they've broken the law, I think that it's within your purview to ask them to step down. But I do believe that we can recall people. The citizens can recall people. And if someone has committed a crime, you can do things about that too. But I am concerned about how this would happen. And what I would suggest is that if you go forward, even voting to put this on the ballot, the wording is really great, and that you ask for a supermajority of the council to even move it forward, because I think this is a very, very serious thing. And Tempe is thought as being very progressive. There's some folks that are working on a project in Indian Bend Wash that want to work with Tempe, and they live in Scottsdale. They want to start in Tempe because Tempe is so progressive. Tempe is revered by a lot of cities. So I think we need to give this serious thought. We love you guys. We appreciate what you do for us. And if there's a scoundrel, we'll get him out. And if someone's broke the law, I know that you would take care of that. Thank you very much. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Next is Doreen Garland. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
Doreen Garland, Buena Vista Ranchos neighborhood. Thank you for listening to me today. I'm just going to say a few things that some people have already said already. I wanted to say something about the code of conduct. Just to say also that we do have the recall process that you guys already have. We as residents have those. The recall takes into consideration what we as voters would want to have done. Taking away our right to use that recall, I think, is disrespectful to us, the people who put you guys in office. One of the things that worries me is groupthink. If you put through this resolution, you have the power to vote another member off of council. Could this stifle another council member from voting their conscience for fear of being retaliated against them by other people, groupthink members, possibly turning city issues into a popularity contest? I would worry that this could put council members against council members or group thinkers against others. I, along with a group of ladies, saw a member of the council, this council, bully and intimidate someone at an LD18 meeting a few months ago. We were in shock to see it, but we were not surprised at that moment. With this resolution, would I take this incident to you with the other witnesses, and then you guys would be required to remove this person from office? That's not something that I would want. I would want you to reprimand this person, and then it would be up to me to start a recall if that behavior did not change, or if I didn't think that the apology was appropriate, if it continued to be a burr under my saddle. I want to be able to have that right to be able to do that. I read that someone said something about this resolution is something similar to what the city employees have
But I understand the city employees, if they do something wrong, they have 3 opportunities to appeal. They go to the director, they go to the city manager, and then they go back to a resident board or a merit board, I understand. And again, I think that's right because it goes back to the residents, that we residents have the opportunity to be able to make the decision if we want you off of the council. I am all for a code of conduct. I'm all for expecting council members and the rest of us to behave respectfully, honestly, and kindly to each other. I am a strong believer in good character and doing the right things even if no one is watching. So reprimand somebody on the board or on your council if they do something wrong. But remember, we voted you onto the island and we want to have the right to vote you off. We did not vote you on the island to take that right away from us. Thank you for letting me say something.
Thank you. Next is Don Hawker.
Don Hawker, Tempe. Yes, I also believe it's the prerogative of the electorate, not the council, to remove people.
Hawker, can you speak into the microphone right there? No, and state your place of residence for the record, please.
1842 East Pebble Beach, Tempe.
Yep.
But I also believe it's the prerogative of the electorate, not the council, to remove people from the city council. There's too many opportunities to use this to remove someone for an unrelated issue, political differences, or and also based on unproven charges and rumors or something like that. That only a convicted person should be removed, and they should be removed by a process that's already in place.
Thank you. Next is Mario Martinez.
I'm sure he'll speak loud enough.
Good afternoon. My name is Mario Martinez. I live in Tempe, and I'm here to speak in favor of the Code of Conduct proposal, which will provide for the potential removal of council members for Code of Conduct violations. This reform is overdue. Currently, all municipal employees are subject to removal for Code of Conduct violations. The same standards should be applied to council members without exception. It is about public accountability and public responsibility. I listened to the prior council discussion on this matter. The right of elected assemblies to impeach or the equivalent thereof is a well-established legal precedent under the U.S. constitutional law. While I respect the arguments against this, it means like they're saying that we should not have that right. I disagree. Many times this right is, and this is as per the public record, has been exercised against deviant sexual predators who also hold public office. In the Arizona legislature, Don Shooter, who volunteered to, well, quite frankly, he volunteered to anally fornicate a gentleman in the Capitol. He is a prime example of why impeachment is appropriate. Those people do not deserve to be in public office. In the prior discussion, Council Member Shapira cautioned that Mr. Shooter is currently suing the state for his removal. But there is a big difference between filing a lawsuit and winning a lawsuit. The Tempe Code of Conduct reform should not be delayed on the basis of a legal basis of some deviant predator like Mr. Shooter who got booted from office. Mr. Shooter is not a credible legal authority, and he should not be treated like one in Tempe. While Councilmember Shapira's caution was well intended, the same was not true of Kobe Granville. Okay, in his insipid public commentary, Kobe stated that under the current proposal, a member of the council could get removed for swearing at a referee during a game in a non-work related setting. Obviously, Kobe is just trying to weasel again. In this debate, weaseling rationales are not beneficial. This code of conduct reform should be approved by the City Council majority because the citizens of Tempe deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Lori DeLuca. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
So I'm Lori DeLuca, Tempe, Arizona, and I really was up all night thinking about this and how I was going to approach this. And certain parts of this, was it the right thing to do? For various reasons. And I decided that I was going to come forward and I'm going to leave it into your hands, and I'm not going to really lay it all out on the line. And I hope I'm as eloquent as some of the speakers that came before me. In regards to this initiative, which you would use to remove council members, I know that you're saying that, well, you're putting this on the ballot for vote. But really you're not, because it gives you a whole bunch of leverage within that. So let's be real. It's to change it, and then from that point forward, you guys are going to have the power to do that. I just want to know why, when Colby brought up term limits, which obviously wouldn't benefit him at all, did all of you not want to speak about that? Or none of you have even addressed putting that on the ballot? Why is that not a measure on the ballot? Just curious. I am wondering what is politically behind this. It seems to me that the mortal turpitude clause is really vague, and it seems to me that there's many of you that have had things in your past that would fall under that. Should we bring up some dealings with the FBI, undercover agent? That was a few years ago. Joel, Corey Woods, Robin. Now you might say nothing came of that, we weren't found guilty, but Colby was not found guilty by the police of a crime either. The part that I struggled with was this information from a public records request that I have that I didn't actually go after, someone gave it to me. Would sending naked pictures to city employees be mortal turpitude? Using your council member job to pick up women, not paying child support, sending inappropriate messages, sexually explicit text on work phones. Would any of this be considered moral turpitude? Because some of you were on council when this happened, and it went to a main mailbox that all of you saw. So I'm just wondering, this seems to me to be really strategically placed at a specific city council member. Colby is one of the only people I've ever met that gets support from progressives, Tea Party members, Republicans, and Democrats. I have never seen it before, and it's because he responds. I didn't actually like him, for the record, when I first met him, but he responds, he gets back to people, and he has the right to be on this council, and the police can do their job, and our job is to elect who we would like to show represent us.
Thank you, Ms. DeLuca. Your time is up.
I understand. Thank you.
All right. Next is Nicole Olmstead. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
My name is Nicole Olmstead. I'm at McClintock and Southern. So I'm a resident, but I'm also here on behalf of the American Heart Association. I'm their government relations director. We're here in support of the consideration of increasing the tobacco purchase age to 21. So the phrase, a youth's brain is like a sponge, applies not only to learning, but to nicotine as well. Symptoms of serious nicotine addiction occur very quickly after experimentation with smoking first begins. 95% of current smokers started before the age of 21, and 80% of those started before the age of 18, which means they had to get the products from somebody who could legally purchase them. Most teenagers, young teenagers, high schoolers have a friend in high school that is 18 years old and can buy the products for them. By creating a distance between those impressionable, spongy brains and increasing the age to 21, you create this, most of those kids no longer have a friend who's 21 who can purchase those products for them. And most 21-year-olds are not willing to do that. And it's not the same social circle. 1 out of every 13 Americans that are currently age 17 and younger will die early from a smoking-related illness. Further, every Arizona household spends $652 of their hard-earned money in tobacco-related illnesses. 4 out of every 100 middle schoolers and 11 out of every 100 high schoolers have reported using electronic cigarettes, which do contain nicotine. Teens that use e-cigarettes are 31% more likely to transition to traditional cigarettes. Sorry about that. And most teens are not aware that electronic products contain nicotine. They simply think it's water and vapor and a little bit of flavoring. We urge you to move this process forward, and we are committed, along with our other partners with the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Society, and the American Lung Association, my colleagues who could not be here this evening. We're committed to helping be part of this stakeholder process and encourage you to consider it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Dr. Fairbanks. Welcome, good to see you.
Well, thank you. Leland Fairbanks, 1866 East Venado Lane, Tempe, Arizona, 85284. I've worked with you folks over many years, and I've gotten many awards because I'm from Tempe. We were just at the U.S. Public Health Service Symposium in Dallas, Texas for the Surgeon General, and they gave 2 awards by surprise. One of them was to the Gilead Health Foundation in California, sustainability in supporting the United States Public Health Service and the advancement of public health. And the second award by surprise was Arizonans concerned about smoking, always there, coming from Tempe and other places in the valley. And so we thank you and all of the colleagues out here. And I don't speak just for myself. We've had 200 different organizations that have supported our efforts over the years. We thank you. You've been #1 on the smoke-free bars when they said it was going to put all the bars out of business. And a year later, you had 14 more liquor licenses than the year before. And so the owner of Rula Bula had originally said, whenever he saw me on the street, get out of the way. Here comes that danger, danger. Women off the street, children off the street. Here comes that crazy old doctor, Dr. Fairbanks. And I talked to him a year later. And he said, after 1 year, this last year at Rula Bula Irish pub, where our hero always used to go there from that Cardinals football team, he said, I've made more money in this last year since Tempe got smoke-free bars than I've made in any year previously. And the reason is now people, whether they smoke or not, they enjoy breathing in our place. And we put a bunch of television screens up, and people come and they watch the games here, and even the smokers say they like it better because they can sneak out for a puff once in a while if they're too addicted to go too long without the smoking. But I brought new customers in who haven't come before, and I think if you do the health promotion side of what you're doing, and Tempe was the first on the smoke-free bars, you've led on the e-cigarettes. These are signs. When we were in Dallas with the Surgeon General, this sign was all over the place, and people said, what sign? And I said, what signs do you want? And they said, we'd like one of the signs that started in Tempe. The first place to put that up was at the Guadalupe City Hall. And they said, well, we'd like to pass this first, but we trust Tempe, so let's wait and see what Tempe does because we'd like to follow them. So people have been following you for a long time, and they should, and it's no question that Tobacco 21 is the right thing to do. I know many of you are going to be plagued by the business people saying, we're going to lose all our customers if we don't sell to these younger people. But you know, they said that about you'd lose all your customers when you went to smoke-free Tempe and the smoke-free bars. They've said when you have no smoking in the cars with children and you led on that and you got Kingman to go with you, it was going to be a great tragedy. But go with it. It's the right thing to do. Tobacco 21 and the military services are pathetic because they don't have the young people trained to respect health.
Thank you, Dr. Fairbanks.
So let's do it. Tobacco 21 does it. for the young people going to the military.
All right, next is Philip Carpenter. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
My name is Philip Carpenter. I am a previous resident of Tempe, but I currently live and reside in Chandler, Arizona. I'm here also representing Arizonans concerned about smoking. I'd like to thank you very much for allowing me to speak this afternoon. Regarding Tobacco 21, I think it's sometimes good to think outside the box. I'd like to pass along what I heard from Scott Hall, who is the Senior Vice President of Civic and Community Initiatives with the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, which has had remarkable Tobacco 21 success all around Kansas City. He suggested find and locate Chamber of Commerce members who either work in healthcare or are administrators in hospitals and gain their support. Try to educate them along with civic leaders how important it is to have a healthy, vibrant, and nicotine-free workforce. This will help make your community a much more desirable location and destination for current and future employers. Having less people being addicted to tobacco, vaping, and nicotine will also help lessen long-term and end-of-life health care costs. Thank you again, and thank you for the many tobacco control achievements you have been responsible for. I hope that soon Tempe can join Cottonwood and Douglas as a Tobacco 21 community here in Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you turn yours off? We gotta take this off. All right, those are all the cards I have that are scheduled to speak or that requested to speak. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to address us on any of the items on the issue review session or the work study session? Yes, please come forward. State your name and place of residence for the record. You get it? Yes. All right. Sorry.
Need that?
Councilman Shapiro, this letter that said we have a #1 draft pick for the Phoenix Suns.
And it's DeAndre
It's DeAndre. All right, Ms. Vega.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. My name is Genevieve Vega. I'm a Tempe resident at 2147 East Cairo Circle. I'm here to speak in support of the Code of Conduct changes. And I'm actually speaking not only as a resident, but also a management consultant. I specialize in organizational effectiveness. So simply put, people hire me to help them make their organizations better. And one of the things that I think is really important about this Code of Conduct change is a pure fact of leadership. So adopting the same Code of Conduct standards as the City of Tempe employees, I think is really important. I think our elected officials should be held to the same, if not higher standards than the employees that we entrust to care and protect our city. So I think this is a really important leadership perspective. It takes leadership courage to put yourself in a position to be held accountable. And from an employee perspective, now I'm not a City of Tempe employee, and no City of Tempe employee certainly asked me to say this, but from an employee's perspective, when your leaders have the ability to be held accountable for actions, that makes your work environment a safe one. One where they feel like they can give feedback and they can do their job without fear of reprisal. And I think this is really important from a leadership perspective, especially because you are elected to this position and not hired to it. And there have been some great comments about committees and things like that to review this process to potentially make it not entirely council's responsibility. But I really believe that policy, so hypothetical situations aren't necessarily reasons to create policy. However, policies, when in place, you hope you never have to use them. But in the event that you do, you hope you have one that protects not only yourselves, but also your employees. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Tim Palmer.
Hello, Mayor and Council. I'm Tim Palmer. I live on West Fairmont Drive in Tempe. I'm a 55-year resident of Tempe, and over the years, I've seen all kinds of little things that have happened, hiccups with council members and things going on in the city of Tempe with votes, and I've always had the confidence with the councils over time, and as I still have a very high confidence with the council and mayor at this time. With regards to the code of conduct, I've been listening and watching everything that's been going on over time, and quite frankly, I'm shocked that the residents of Tempe have not started a recall effort for the reasons that have been discussed tonight. I have complete confidence that the mayor and council, if this were to be voted on by the residents of Tempe, can make proper decisions, and I have complete confidence that this is a change that needs to happen, and it's long overdue, and I hope that there comes a time when we don't have to necessarily use this, but I do believe a change is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all the cards I have. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to address us on any of the items under issue review session or the work study session? This is the time to do so, to get our attention. Seeing none, I'll close that portion for the public hearings, and we're going on to the issue review session, which is the Tempe Pre one-year implementation report. All right, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Naomi Farrell, Human Services Director. With me is Marie Raymond, Education Manager, and Nia Gordon from Harder and Company. They will be presenting the Tempe Pre one-year implementation report and the initial evaluation findings. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Marie to get us started.
All right. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. This evening, we will discuss Tempe Pre's current implementation status, information on our participating families, year-to-date budget and projections, our preliminary evaluation findings. We'll share the ways we've been engaging our families and some of our parent satisfaction survey results, and we'll discuss Tempe Pre's Year 2 implementation. So this evening, I'll share quotes such as this one from our families that have been collected in parent surveys over the course of the school year. And just so you know, these are all photos of our Tempe Pre children that will be displayed, and we did get photo releases during the application process. So Tempe Pre aligns with the city's strategic priority number 3, quality of life, and directly impacts performance measure 3.06, which is to achieve a percentage of Tempe 3 and 4-year-old children that are in quality early learning settings greater than or equal to the statewide goal of 45% by the year 2030. And since high-quality preschool directly impacts future academic success, secondary performance measures impacted include third grade reading, high school graduation, and post-secondary attainment. As you know, Tempe's involvement in preschool was the result of discovering evidence that 2/3 of Tempe 3 and 4-year-olds were not attending preschool, and 2/3 of Tempe kindergarten students were not ready for school on day one. So without a high-quality early education, at-risk children are 25% more likely to drop out of school and 60% more likely to never attend college. So this graphic from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation demonstrates evidence of the importance of ensuring that all children, especially those at risk, are able to access high-quality preschool programs. In March of 2017, staff were directed to develop a 2-year pilot program that would expand access to free, full-day, year-round, high-quality preschool for Tempe children ages 3 and 4 whose families have incomes at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. In August of 2017, Tempe Pre opened 15 classrooms serving 270 children in elementary schools in the Tempe Elementary and Kyrene school districts. An additional 5 classrooms were opened in the Tempe Elementary School District in January of 2018, bringing the program to a total of 20 classrooms serving 360 children. Tempe Pre would not exist without the strong and supportive partnerships that have been developed. The City of Tempe has oversight of Tempe Pre, managing the budget, developing marketing and publicity, overseeing the application and random selection process, verifying student and family eligibility. We place students, manage the extended learning, camp, and summer programs, coordinate teacher professional development, coordinate with Quality First for classroom ratings and coaching, and manage the research and evaluation projects, and develop and maintain partnerships with our school districts, funders, and community partners. Our school districts hire and supervise teaching staff and instructional assistants, purchase materials and supplies for the classrooms, secure meals and snacks for students, and work collaboratively with the city on student assessment and teacher professional development. And Kids Zone provides before and after care at several sites, assisting with camps and summer programming, and provides staff at the 2 Kids Zone Tempe pre-classrooms at Getz. Our community partners include First Things First, the Arizona Department of Education, and the Thrive to 5 Family Resource Centers. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about our families. Tempe pre-families live throughout the city of Tempe. At least 25% of our residents do not have reliable access to their own vehicle. And that is why we worked with our school districts to ensure that Tempe pre-locations were spread throughout the city, yet also strategically placed where we know there are higher concentrations of low-income families. This map shows the distribution of our families located on the purple dots, the locations of our schools in yellow, and the higher concentrations of poverty as indicated by the shaded areas.
Councilman Shapiro?
Thank you, Mayor. Marie, could you, in the context of this map, could you just talk briefly about the, if I remember the study correctly that we did with the Institute for Child Success and the locations of existing Quality First, I think it was 3, 4, and 5 star, or 4 and 5 star rated preschools. How do our locations of our schools relate in context to the existing high-rated Quality First preschools?
Sure. So what we learned was specifically in our highest poverty areas in the zip code 85281, there were 0 high-quality preschools available to our residents. So by strategically placing our locations throughout the city, we've really increased access to high quality.
And we now have 3 or 4 locations in 85281.
We have
3.
4, I believe, if Holdeman is in 81, which I believe it is.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
I just got a question. What census tract year are you using for the data?
I would have to get back to you on that. This was developed by our own internal GIS, so our city GIS, so I would assume that it's as current as possible.
Yep.
Our Tempe pre-parents reflect the diversity of our Tempe community. Our average Tempe pre-household size is a family of 4 who earn $26,500 annually. 56% of our students are female and 44% are male. The majority of our families have English as a primary language, but a little over a quarter have Spanish as their primary language. 25% of our children are Hispanic and 22% are of mixed heritage. In order to get the word out to our families, marketing and publicity efforts included placing posters in all Tempe preschool locations, at mobile home parks and in city facilities, and flyers were given out at child find screenings. Press releases resulted in coverage by local news outlets such as Univision, KJazz, AZ Central, Cronkite News, and the Wrangler News. The program was advertised on screen ads at the Pollock Theater and on Tempe Elementary marquees. And Tempe Pre was represented on social media with a banner on the city's webpage and postings on Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor, and Instagram. One of the questions we had was, would we have enough interest or applications to fill available seats? Well, we found out very quickly that we could fill seats and have a healthy wait list. We received a total of 620 applications over the course of this past school year for the 360 available seats. 177 of our current 360 students are 3-year-olds who will be returning for their second year of Tempe Pre, leaving 183 seats available for next school year. And to date, we have received 381 applications for those seats.
Councilman Shapiro.
Marie, could you quickly touch on, of those 620 students who applied for 17-18, how many of those at some point were offered a Tempe Pre seat?
So Once we verified eligibility, so out of those 620 applications, some were deemed ineligible because they weren't Tempe residents or other reasons. Those that were still eligible were placed on a wait list. So if we had any natural attrition, we were able to then call people on the wait list and place them into open seats.
So of the ones who were eligible in the 620, were there any who were never offered a seat?
No.
So every student who is eligible at some point, perhaps on the wait list, was offered a seat?
Correct.
That's great.
Mary, just saying, thank you. Mary, you said that there was, for this coming up year, there's 300 plus people waiting to get into the program?
So for the 183 available seats so far, we've received 381 applications.
And then from that 381 applications, all Tempe residents?
No.
No.
So what we then
okay.
do is go through a process where we eliminate those who aren't eligible.
And then income and all that stuff too?
Correct.
So you do have, even if they had income, they were trying to.
Sure, and then we verify. Also,
We're not Tempe residents.
And Mayor, just one other question. The deadline for that is tomorrow, is that right? Or is it today?
So tomorrow is when we close the latest round of applications, and then we'll do a random selection.
Thank you.
Okay.
So having a quality preschool program during school hours provides the opportunity for parents and caregivers to increase work hours or go back to school. And providing before and after care along with school break camps and summer camps further assists families in knowing that they have safe, quality care for their children. This past school year, 72 families utilized Tempe Pre's before and after care programs. Fall, winter, and spring breaks were offered with a combined 118 families participating. And this summer, we are offering 2 sessions of summer camp with 6 classrooms, all located at Getz, and serving 108 students in each session. So a little bit on our year-to-date budget and projections. Year 1 of Tempe Pre was estimated to cost around $3 million. Projected actual expenses are at approximately $2.5 million. The $500,000 savings occurred through salary savings of the Tempe Pre staff, savings in administrative fees and services, and conservative spending by Tempe Elementary. During budget development, the Tempe Pre fiscal year 19 request built in a 3% pay increase for teachers and instructional assistants. However, both Tempe Elementary School District and the Kyrene School District, their projected personnel increases are substantially higher than assumed at budget submission, and this is due to the governor's recent legislation increasing teacher salaries. Teachers and IAs will receive increases to both wages and benefits. So the ability to carry the remaining funds of approximately $500,000 forward into year 2 will provide adequate funds for the remainder of the pilot. This will make up for any shortfall due to salary and benefit increases for teaching staff and increased utilization of extended care and camp programs by Tempe Pre families.
Councilman Shapiro.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to quickly make sure I can re-explain this in terms that I understand, because it helps me understand it. So the savings would move forward into next year, and that is necessary because with the, and I'm not sure what exactly the raises were in Tempe and Kyrene, but 8, 9, 10% roughly, 11% raise in Tempe-El, in order for us to keep up with their salary schedule, which is going to go up by 11% because of the $280 million that I credit the Red for Ed movement for, not the governor, but because of that increase, if we're going to keep up with that within our Tempe Pre faculty, we're going to need those extra funds next year. Is that a good re-explanation?
Correct, yes.
Got it, okay. Just want to make sure I got it.
The budget savings in assessment, evaluation, and professional development were achieved thanks to the generosity of state and local support. In addition to Mayor and Council's operational support of Tempe Pre, we've also received over $2 million of philanthropic and community support, largely for research and evaluation. The Jerry Brock Foundation donated $10,000 to Tempe Pre in 2017. This donation was used to assist in program development. The Virginia G. Piper Charitable Trust has committed over $500,000 to support Quality First participation and teacher professional development and training. First Things First has generously offered to cover costs of a third-party evaluator, Harder & Company, who will be presenting their preliminary findings today. And the Helios Education Foundation is investing $1.3 million into a longitudinal study of our Tempe Pre children, following them in their early elementary years to study the elements needed to sustain preschool momentum, ultimately impacting third grade reading and math skills.
I have a question. On the philanthropic community support, so is it safe to say the cost for the first year was $2.5 million, 2.5, and then there's additional $2 million to help with coaching and teaching and studying, getting the results of the effects of the program?
Correct. So
We're looking at $4 million in the first year, combined.
the additional $2 million is to support teacher professional development and research and evaluation.
Just a quick follow-up. Yeah, that's Robin's question is my question.
Yeah.
How much of that is spent in the first year, and how much of that is for longitudinal study?
So
That was my follow-up.
the Helios study is longitudinal. It's a 4-year study. The Piper Trust is over 2 years. First Things First evaluation is over 2 years as well.
For the pilot, so it covers the pilot.
Covers the
Correct.
study or the pilot of
No,
funding
it
the
covers it.
program?
This helps with the coaching and teaching of the teachers and the kids and studying the effects
Research and
of this program,
To support the pilot.
to support the pilot. So this is not all spent in 1 year, this is for the
Correct.
duration, okay.
Yes.
That's all.
And Mayor, first, I just want to say, our staff are awesome in their ability to follow up and pursue in getting these grants. And, Joel and I obviously have been involved in a few of these conversations to follow up on some of these. It's awesome. It's great that we've been able to get this outside help, and it just shows when you put skin in the game what kind of help you can get from the outside. I just want to clarify, of that $2 million, how much of that are we authorized to spend for operation of the program?
None of this is for operations.
Including even the 10 grand from Jerry Brock?
So that was used for program development, right?
But that we had some more flexibility on that 10 grand, but the remaining balance of the 2 million, we did not have discretion as to how that was spent. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So now I get to turn it over to Nia Gordon, and Nia is from Harder and Company, and she's going to walk us through some initial evaluation data.
Thank you. Good evening. As Marie mentioned, my name is Nia Gordon, and I am part of the team at Harder and Company Community Research, conducting the evaluation of the Tempe Pre-Pilot Program. Our goal is to assess the progress of Tempe Pre during program year 1. To that end, we examined Tempe Pre classroom quality, children's development over the course of the program year, and teachers' perspectives and reflections on the professional development they received as a part of the Tempe Pre program. So first, we examined the baseline quality ratings of the Quality First classrooms planning to implement Tempe Pre, as well as all Quality First classrooms across the state of Arizona. This comparison found that the classrooms selected to implement Tempe Pre were entering into the pilot program with generally similar quality levels as all Quality First classrooms, and statistically significantly higher quality in the classroom environment and emotional support domains. Though Tempe Pre classrooms are already coming in at a relatively high quality level, we expect that the Tempe Pre program, which provides additional support to improve classroom quality, will improve and sustain the quality of these classrooms over time. And we will track those improvements in quality over the course of Tempe Pre program implementation.
Councilman Shapiro?
I apologize again, just want to make sure I understand this. So what you're saying is at the start of Tempe Pre, before we'd even really started the program and brought in students, et cetera, the structure of our program was such that we were already rating higher than many established programs. Is that a fair restating of what you're saying?
That's correct. On average, the programs, the classrooms that were going to be involved in Tempe Pre were on average higher, but only that difference in quality level was only statistically significant in classroom environment and emotional support.
Thank you.
Sure. Next, exploration of children's developmental levels across 6 core domains found that at preschool entry, Tempe Pre students are typically either below or meeting their expected developmental level in all domains. Developmental levels were established by researchers at the Center for Educational Measurement and Evaluation using a norm sample of over 111,000 children across the United States, ranging from 0 to 71 months, that match the race and gender demographics of the 2009 census. So the data presented here shows how children in Tempe Pre perform compared to a representative sample of children across the country. It is also important to note that in the present analysis, we only included data from children who, one, had data that could be matched between baseline and the end of program year 1, and 2, had developmental data recorded both at baseline and at the end of year 1 in that particular domain. As some teachers were not able to score each child in all domains, the number of students with complete data in each domain varies. As you can see in the figure, the developmental domains in which children are most often falling below widely held developmental expectations at preschool entry are the social emotional domain, the literacy domain, and the cognitive domain. However, most children shifted from performing below expected developmental levels across all domains to meeting or exceeding developmental expectations in all domains. Interesting to note are the shifts in developmental levels in the social emotional and literacy domains. Specifically, in the social emotional domain, while more than 3/4 of children were below their developmental expectation at Tempe pre-program entry, 80% met or exceeded their social emotional developmental expectation by the end of the program year. Similarly, in the literacy domain, while 70% of children were below expected developmental levels and no children exceeded expected literacy levels at baseline, by the end of program year 1, 93% of students were either meeting or exceeding literacy expectations. As a part of participation in the Tempe pre-program, teachers participate in trainings, receive one-on-one coaching, and engage in professional development activities. When teachers were asked about their experiences with the trainings they received, they reported that the trainings were useful in increasing their knowledge about the training topic and said they were interested in attending more trainings each year. A review of teacher coaches' notes revealed that teachers typically receive feedback around schedule optimization and improving the quality of the classroom environment, including tips to ensure students are engaged at all phases of the school day and ideas for age-appropriate activities for students to engage in. Finally, when teachers were asked about their experiences with the Tempe pre-program overall, they reported seeing huge social and behavioral growth among their students over the course of the program year. In summary, as predicted, additional support for children and teachers in early care settings resulted in positive changes that are likely to set children on a path to success. Specifically, the baseline quality ratings of the Quality First classrooms planning to implement Tempe Pre were generally similar to the Quality First classrooms that were not planning to implement Tempe Pre. And we plan to explore how classroom quality levels change over time for both types of classrooms. Next, teachers felt that training, coaching, and professional development were beneficial. And finally, most children were below expected developmental levels in all domains at baseline, but met or exceeded their developmental expectations in all domains at the end of year 1. In terms of next steps, sites will continue to collect data during subsequent years of this pilot program, and our evaluation team will continue to investigate whether the goals of the Tempe pre-program are met. With additional data, we will use more in-depth analyses focused on examining student and teachers' progress, growth, and development across time. Additional primary data, such as information about student-teacher interactions, students' home environment, and child-caregiver interactions, will be collected to allow us to better understand the underlying factors related to the success of the Tempe pre-program.
So a little bit about our family engagement. While high-quality preschool has a direct impact on children's kindergarten readiness, we know that parents remain a child's first teacher, and supporting parents in this role further supports their child's development. We provided families a number of opportunities to engage with one another, with college and career planning, and with parenting professionals. The Triple P Positive Parenting Program is one of the most effective evidence-based parenting programs in the world, currently used in more than 25 countries. Triple P gives parents strategies to help them build strong, healthy relationships, confidently manage their children's behavior, and prevent problems from developing. Families have shared that since having their child in Tempe Pre, they've been able to work more hours, get better jobs, or go back to school. Parents have now been able to re-enter the workforce, assisting the family in economic advancement. We've received 84 responses so far to our recently distributed end-of-year parent survey. 40% of families report that they've been able to return to school. 91% report that they either have been able to go back to work or can work additional hours. 14 families reported that they've been able to get off or reduce the amount of government assistance such as SNAP or TANF, and 15 families reported that they've been able to obtain secure housing. And we look forward to sharing more as responses continue to be received. In regards to overall program satisfaction, when surveyed, 97% of Tempe Pre families indicated that they were satisfied or very satisfied with the program. When asked, how has Tempe Pre benefited your family, the majority of the responses spoke to the financial benefits of participating in Tempe Pre. Families were eager to share stories of their children's growth and development in academic and social areas. And parents overwhelmingly stated that access to Tempe Pre was important. They appreciated having multiple locations across the city to select from, easing the burden of transportation by being located close to their homes, place of work, or at a sibling school. 91% of parents surveyed stated that they've seen the greatest growth in their children's social and emotional development. Thanks to Tempe Pre's play-based curriculum, children can routinely observe and learn from others' emotions and experiences. They learn to take turns, delay gratification, negotiate conflicts, solve problems, share goals, acquire flexibility, and live with disappointment, all key ingredients for intellectual and social emotional success. Many communities across the state have expressed interest in Tempe's preschool efforts. Staff have presented to groups of community members and elected officials from Flagstaff to Surprise and have provided programmatic information from the Verde Valley to Pima County. And we're already well into planning and preparation for year 2. Year 2 of Tempe Pre begins in August for the 18-19 school year. We'll be hosting parent orientation sessions and meet the teacher events during the month of July. And staff returned just last night, actually, from North Carolina, where the Institute for Child Success held a National Pay for Success convening. Ann Lynn DiDomenico represented Tempe on a panel on lessons learned from federally supported feasibility studies, and I represented Tempe Pre on a panel on early learning lessons from preschool projects at various stages. I'll be co-presenting with First Things First evaluation staff at the Early Childhood Summit in August, and Human Services will host a Tempe Early Childhood Summit in September, where we will be joined by staff from the National League of Cities Early Childhood Network. Staff will provide updates to Mayor and Council in October of 2018 for preliminary kindergarten readiness results, and in June of 2019 we'll come back for a Year 2 implementation report. First Things First and Helios Education Foundation will continue to work with us on the research and evaluation component of Tempe Pre, and we look forward to continuing to share their insights and results with you.
Councilor Navarro?
Thank you, Mayor. And first thing, thank you guys for an outstanding report, and Dave for leadership on this, and Tempe Elementary and Kyrene School Districts. I mean, because of the partnership, honestly, Chris, I mean, this doesn't happen. So it's strategic that we were able to reach out to a variety of different partners to help out with this program and have the success that we're having with a program like this. And obviously, when you hear the stats and the scores and everything else like that, you know it's a good stuff. You just know it is. You know you've made a positive impact on those kids that probably would have never had the schooling. So with that being said, it is kind of special that this city had the ability to achieve this pilot for at least 2 years, and the findings from this is encouraging because it's something you want to showcase not only to other cities but also showcase to the state that it's a desperate need of funding pre-K, and how important it is to everything we just heard tonight of really providing the quality education that we need to provide for all of our kids. So with that, obviously we come up with a challenge of trying to how do we sustain it? How do we support it from here on out? I think we had a lot of fortunes of the fact that strategically placing money in places from development, lease-back agreements and things like that, we were structurally in a great place to provide support for this program, and we probably could do that for a few number of years. But I think with what we have done as a city, I think strategically we need to think about if this is important to our community, how are we going to have a continual funding source that's not a burden of a tax increase. Maybe it is a tax increase, I don't know. But also to utilize the resources we have in our community. We talked about the philanthropical people that have supported this. These are one of those things that I think when you showcase the benefits of what this does, I think that those supports might start to increase even more so, because it is a program that has true benefit. The other thing is, and I've talked to Dave about this and staff members about this, we have dispensaries and marijuana growing facilities that have money to donate. It's one of those hot topics, but we don't ask. No one asks, and it's money that could be received. There are monies out there to help supplement for programs like this. So with that being said, and I also want to talk about the fact that 381 people have registered for this. Maybe they're not all at Tempe, or maybe they're not all qualified, really to showcase the fact that how this is such a need. To really have a discussion about possible a tier system for certain types of income to help supplement those families so that they can get in at an affordable rate. And then the last thing I want to say, and it was really strategic when this program came out, was the quality of this program by far is what makes it special, because without the quality of this program, we don't make the impacts that we're making. When we first started this thing, and my kids and all our kids going to pre-K and ASU, and just seeing the attention, especially when it comes down to teacher ratios, and then the quality of education that's being presented, those things say a lot. So with that being said, I know that there's other avenues possibly even to look at, even with retired teacher programs to help supplement costs, or to help to keep those numbers of quality of education ratio, teacher ratio to students, with a master teacher there in the program. So a lot more to talk about, and I know Dave's probably going to talk more about having this being continued on as a work group, because there is a desperate need to have this information evaluated.
Councilmember Shapiro.
Thank you, Mayor. A few things. First, can we return to slide 31 real quick? So I know this is the mayor's favorite slide.
Just because he's in it?
Yeah. And of course, the reason the satisfaction is so high is because Mark is teaching class. Yeah. But I wanted to return to this slide for one reason, and that is I have never seen a satisfaction survey come back with 0 unsatisfied responses, none, in any of the 3 questions. And so I looked at this at first, I was thinking to myself in my brain, looking at data like this, you just anticipate that there's going to be the positive and the negative, and I was thinking that maybe the maroon or purple, whatever color that was the negative, but that was just the neutral responses. To see as many very satisfied and satisfied, I was thinking about Naomi looking at this data. Do you have any other programs that you oversee that have this kind of satisfaction data? I mean,
All our programs have.
oh, of course, all of them. That's right. I'm sorry. Yes.
What about a citizen satisfaction? What about a citizen satisfaction survey?
So, slide 24. Can we go back to slide 24?
Citizen satisfaction survey is up there.
Yeah, but I mean, 0 negative responses is pretty amazing. And to have the very satisfied number as high as it is also pretty incredible. So, slide 24 is really the most important, in my mind, most important slide in all of this data. So our third-party evaluator has given us sort of an explanation of this, but there's just some things that I think are important to highlight for our community on this slide. One, and I want to make sure I understand this right, and I probably should have asked it when you had the slide up, but the fall of 17 measurement, if I understand this correctly, was measuring where they were developmentally for the age they were at the time that they were measured. Is that correct? Okay. And then likewise, the spring of 2018 was measuring where they were at the age that they were measured in spring of 18. So they're actually expected to do quite a bit better, or a year's worth better, or 9 months better, in that spring of 18 measurement than they were in the fall of 17. Is that fair? Okay. So I just want to be clear, and I want to make sure everybody understands. A 3-year-old who came in at 3 years old in fall of 17 was measured to find out where they were developmentally in terms of 3-year-olds. If they then turned 4 in that school year, in spring of 18, they were measured to see where they were in terms of 4-year-olds. So some people might look at this data and say, well, of course they made improvements in the year. But this data is not about improving on the same set of measurements. It's about saying where developmentally you were behind at 3 for 3-year-olds. So for example, under social emotional, 76% of the kids were falling below where they should be developmentally for 3-year-olds. When they were measured in spring of 18, 83% of the students were meeting or exceeding where they should be socially, emotionally for 4-year-olds. So to see that kind of progress in a year, I just want to tout how amazing this data is when you think about the fact that they were at a higher bar for that spring 18 measurement than they were for fall of 17. And in every category in fall of 17, in every category on here, a majority of the students in the program were not meeting at the measurements. And in every category in spring of 18, a majority of the students were meeting at the 4-year-old measurement. And as an educator and a former math teacher, I love data like this. This is incredible. Just in terms of formative assessment moving forward for these kids, this data is unbelievable. And our teachers and instructional aides and Tempe pre-staff deserve a huge congratulations because it will make a difference for these kids for the rest of their lives. Thank you.
I just wanted to really thank our staff and especially our partners in this, because obviously this, as you can see from this presentation, we can't do it by ourselves. So we reached out. We have our partners that were mentioned. They were identified in their generosity to knowing how important achieving the goals that was set out with the pre-K. And I got to tell you, we all know that this is obviously, I mean, the results are there is clearly something that's needed, not just in Tempe, but statewide. And this is something that it's exciting to be a part of. And I just want to thank our staff and our partners for everything you've done, and our school districts in particular, to helping get this first year pilot, or the first year out of a 2-year pilot program moving along in a great fashion. So it helps to give us the necessary information that we need. And I encourage us to continue to work with the partners. And I know we're going to continue we have a working group. It will continue to move forward. I think Randy's on it, Lauren's on it, and then
we're proposing tonight.
Yeah.
Tonight we're talking.
And that's what we're looking at, is obviously continue on the working group so we can get some more information. Vice Mayor?
No, just really quick. I mean, I think you guys have said it all, and I won't be able to say it as loud as David did, but I will say just a couple of things. I don't think any of us here at this table had any doubt that that success would come, because Naomi, you and your team, Chris Bush and her team, I mean, to me, to be able to put those entities together and the great staff that we had, I mean, we live in a really incredible community of a lot of compassionate and caring people that know their stuff. And I couldn't be prouder of the work that you guys have all been able to do, but we've been able to do it together. And like I said, a lot of that stuff has been said, but the results speak for itself. To not only have such a quality program, but to actually see the successes and have them measured, to be able to show, what an impact each and every one of you. Those of you that are here in this room, I just want to say thank you for what you do every single day. I mean, you are truly changing the lives of our youth here in this community, so thank you for that. And Naomi Farrell and your team, and Marie, you guys are really remarkable. You pulled something together really quick, and I know it was kind of like lighting a fire, but you know what? You took that fire hose and you figured it out. And I just got to say, excellent job. I couldn't be prouder of the work and everything that you guys have been able to do.
We'd have to say thank you to council for taking that chance and jumping in there and giving us that opportunity to build something.
So the ask, I think, is for us to continue the working group. Is council good with continuing the working group?
Well, there's a new item.
Could you want to do that now, Mayor?
If there's anyone else.
I had something I want to say about the working group, if that's okay. Do we want to move to that now from the work study? Okay. So, Mayor, Councilmember Cubey and I talked about have been talking for quite some time about the next steps and what the future of Tempe Pre may be, and timing and how the funding would work. And Joel and I have had a conversation as well about this, a couple conversations about this as well. And I just, since this is my last Cal meeting ever.
Yeah, oh, God, please don't. No.
Well, don't say that.
Yeah, okay.
We're looking at the positive things.
Yeah. You're leaving. But anyway, since I'm leaving, and this is my last Cal meeting, I anticipate ever, I want to make sure that we've got a great team looking at this going forward. And Lauren and I talked about this, and so we put together a Cal memo, and Randy, I know, expressed interest to Lauren about joining as well. And I, of course, have talked to Joel. I obviously should not be in the work group since I'll be gone in a month, but I think it'll be in great hands with the three of you, for sure.
Yes, it will.
Yep. Yes, I will. So
That's it. Thank you.
there you go. So thank you. Thank you. All right. Next item is the proposed expansion of the Community Assistance Mortgage Program, otherwise known as CAMP. Skateboarders.
Oh,
All right, Levon and Naomi,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mayor and Council, Naomi Farrell, Human Services Director. With me is Levon Lamy, Housing Manager. We're here to present and discuss a proposed expansion of the Community Assisted Mortgage Program for workforce housing. Staff will be seeking direction from Council on program policy items. I'll turn it over to Levon.
Right, so an expansion of the Community Assisted Mortgage Program does tie into Council Priority 4.9 for the Housing Attainability Index. The specific performance measures are still in development, but this would relate. In October of 2017, the Workforce Housing Working Group put forward 4 strategies that we've been working towards: establishing policies for fee reductions for workforce housing units, establishing an affiliate nonprofit of the Tempe Housing Authority, that's been done and it's fully operational, expansion of the existing Community Assisted Mortgage Program to increase workforce housing homeownership, and to work with the Tempe Industrial Development Authority to issue bonds to help create workforce housing. In structuring this program, we have modeled it after the existing federally funded CAMP program. The maximum assistance eligibility would be set at $35,000 per household. The eligible use of the funds would be restricted to the purchase of an approved single-family residence. So this would either be a single-family detached, condo, townhouse, patio home, unit A of a duplex, so long as it's not the entire duplex. The unit must pass a housing quality standards inspection prior to the close of escrow. Any deficiencies in ensuring that it is a safe, sanitary, and decent home must be corrected before we would be able to move forward. With the expansion of the CAMP program, the existing program is specifically designed and utilizes federal funds for households earning 80% or less of the area median income. This expanded program would be set for families between 81% and 120% of the area median income, or what we've defined as workforce housing. Just for context, a family of 4, this means their gross annual income would be between $55,971 a year at the low end and $82,930 at the high end. We are restricting this to HUD's definition of a first-time home buyer. So that means you would not, be who's owned a home in the last 3 years within the close of escrow, and you must be able to secure a primary mortgage with the lender on your own. The terms and conditions of this, it would be a 0% interest deferred loan. We would put a lien on the property to ensure that the funds are repaid. The repayment is due at the time of transfer of title, so if you sell the house or transfer the house to another family member, refinance for any reason other than rate or term reductions, or the unit is no longer your primary residence. We do conduct annual certifications to ensure that it is still your primary unit. There is a little bit of associated risk with this type of program. Should the family default on their primary mortgage because the eCamp loan would be in a subordinated position, it would be written off if the short sale of the home didn't bring in enough proceeds to pay off both loans. However, the existing CAMP program has been around for a little over 10 years. In the last 10 years, it has assisted 104 households. There have only been 2 recorded foreclosures in the last 3 years. So we don't lose money on these very often. Oops. Some of the consideration points for the maximum eligibility, a family of 4 earning 120% AMI, their gross income would be $82,930 a year. The maximum list price of a house that the family would be able to look for would be $231,500. Due to the income level, the maximum mortgage that would be sustainable is $203,000. Ultimately, what the eCamp is doing is increasing the buying power of that family by $31,000, roughly $30,000, and increasing their options for purchasing units. Minimum eligibility at the $55,971. The maximum list price would be $203,000. Maximum sustainable mortgage would be $177,000. We are modeling this to ensure affordability long term. We're sticking with the 30% of your monthly gross income should go towards housing, 40% absolute maximum. So in putting this program together, we do need to request some direction from Mayor and Council. The first is, do we want to establish long-term dedicated funding for this program? For example, 20% of any new GIPLET lease revenues. Of course, the units would vary based on any new projects, or a recurring fixed amount in the annual budget of, for the sake of argument, $350,000, which would support 10 households a year.
But before you do that, one of the things I think I want to say, I really commend staff and the working group, because the working group, to have these goals come out of the working group is really exciting to see. And this is something that's been a priority for this council. When you look at the 20% of the new revenue funds that could come in, whatever proceeds are made, I just hope that those proceeds go back into the program and not into a general fund. I just hope they go back into the CAMP program when the proceeds are paid off.
When the loans pay off. Actually, that's one of the things we need council's direction on.
Okay.
So establishing the $35,000 as the maximum needs-based assistance, establishing a maximum purchase price of the home at $219,000. That is set at 100% of the area median sales price of the last 500 homes prior to HUD releasing the date of the information.
Wow.
Say that 3 times.
Say that again. No, just kidding.
What that does is it helps to ensure the affordability. That way, if mom or dad, grandma or grandpa are going to contribute on top of the city contributing, it sets a maximum purchase price so that you're not going to put yourself in a position where you're in a home you can't afford. The other part we would like direction on is upon repayment of the loan, should we reinvest these funds into the eCamp program?
Yes.
Should we reinvest them into other workforce housing programs? Or should we reinvest them into a blend of eCamp and other workforce housing programs? Now, just as a point of context, the existing CAMP program has been operating a little over 10 years. The average repayment is 8 years from the date of loan origination. So we are just now in the CAMP program getting to a point where these proceeds are coming back in so that this would be a self-sustaining program.
Based on the last comment you mentioned on self-sustaining, I think it's important, and I would ask council for their support, if whatever the proceeds that come back with after it's paid back, it goes right back into this so we can help sustain this program for the longevity. Okay.
Yeah.
Vice Mayor?
No, absolutely. I definitely agree. I mean, I know Randy and Joel and I worked in this working group for a while, and appreciate the council approving our recommendations. And I think it's great to have recommendations, but if you don't really have the juice behind them and the funds to be able to make them impactful, then we're never going to get anywhere. And so for me, I appreciate you guys taking the time. And I got to say, Levon is great. I mean, he has been just a stellar rock star of knowledge and information whenever it comes to affordable housing, workforce housing. So Levon, thank you for that. And Naomi, thank you for bringing everybody together to bring us this request. And I certainly do think that we need to do it. I like the idea of the new GIPLET lease revenue. I realize if we have a recurring fixed annual budget amount, which would be ideal, I know that's going to have to compete with other things, and maybe it would rise to the level, so I'm not opposed to that by any means. And the 35 is fine. I know we've had that conversation too. And I agree with the mayor. I think it's really important that those funds go back directly into this program to really give it a shot to be self-sustaining. Because I think even if you do a blend, it's going to take it away, and you're not going to really have the power that you need behind this particular program to be successful for a long term, so then it can be self-sustaining. That's the ideal goal. So I don't know, Mayor, that would be my thought process. But again, I want to say thank you guys so very much. And it's really too bad that our educators aren't here today, because they were here, but they left a little early, because this is exactly the program that would fit a lot of those educators that really wanted to be able to reside in the city of Tempe, but just didn't quite qualify because, right? So we want them to be part of this Tempe community, and I think this program really opens up a lot of doors for individuals that I think are serving our community but aren't able to live here. So if nothing else, maybe we'll get the word to them if this passes and we can move forward.
Anybody else? Yes, Councilman Cubey.
I want to say good job to the working group. Really appreciate all your hard efforts, and I'm fully supportive moving forward.
Anybody else? Anything else? You miss anything? You get direction?
Got everything?
We're looking at the 20.
Mayor?
Oh, Councilman Granville.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in, particularly to thank Councilmember Arredondo Savage. You know, this came out from a discussion that her and I had sort of after a meeting about 3 or 6 months ago now, maybe longer, and she's just done an outstanding job working with staff and keeping this ball moving forward. I'm absolutely in support of it. I thought all the stuff in the documents were fine. I agree with you, Mayor. It should roll into an ongoing fund so that in 10 or 15 years they can maybe have a discussion about is it enough to be self-sustaining, but that's a long ways away. So I really appreciate the work that Vice Mayor Arredondo Savage did and all the support from council for this, and understanding that there are a lot of people that, you know, that have white collar jobs and work day in and day out and still can't afford to live in Tempe. And this is a great program to get them a little bit closer.
Yep.
Just to restate, we're looking at the 20% for new GIPLET lease revenue, the $35,000 as the maximum assistance, and then the maximum purchase price of $219,000, and that we would reinvest any monies coming back into the program again.
And then also continue to, we should, hang on, Councilman Graham, but we should also continue to look at partnerships where we can find those. And don't just limit it to the proceeds from future GIPLET deals. I think there's something else that we could, I mean, look what we did with the pre-K and the community support and philanthropy. I mean, what else? Just because there's maybe no federal funding at this time, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be in working with Marge and our government relations to work to see what other programs federally that we may be able to tap into. I don't want to just close the door on that. I think, and I just let Marge know that we should continue to look at the whole realm of opportunities from federal, our partners, and then other, obviously, philanthropists in the community. Vice Mayor, then Councilman Cubey.
And I would just say too, I think in regards to like the maximum purchase price and some of those things that we're talking about, to just be not necessarily flexible, but maybe to just evaluate them, because I know times are changing pretty drastically. So just make sure, as you kind of see hopefully some great successes, that we're not putting ourselves in a bad position. So I would just say make sure we stay attuned to what's happening.
Well, I probably should have mentioned we reevaluate these numbers every year based on the current.
Councilman
I have the
Cubey.
exact same point, so thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait,
Hey,
Councilman
you didn't
Granville?
get back to me?
Yeah, I just did
you.
it right now. Councilman Granville.
Okay. The very thing that staff just followed up on, because one of the things we frequently run into is we make a policy with a fixed dollar amount, and over 10 or 15 or 20 years, that policy isn't adjusted for inflation. And so I'm just really glad to hear that it sounds like what you're saying is the $35,000 amount and I think it was $214,000 amount is adjusted based as new federal numbers come out. Is that correct?
Correct. Not 214, 219.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. That sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item. Golf Enterprise Fund update. All right.
New Mayor and Council.
Hayton, welcome.
Craig Hayton, Parks Manager. I'm joined by Steve White, Planning Research Analyst, Public Works Department, part of the Golf Tempe team. Certainly it takes a team effort to provide the recreational opportunities that we provide through this. But we have a great opportunity to provide a Golf Enterprise Fund update today. Our first update actually since we implemented the new business model back in 2012. And just really want to highlight to start the uniqueness of the City of Tempe's recreational environments and amenities that we offer our citizens and our visitors. We are relatively small compared to other municipalities when it comes geographically at 40 square miles, but we offer more parks than we have square miles within the city. 2 desert preserves, the Tempe Town Lake, the Rio Salado parks that go along with it, spring training complex, and then 2 golf courses that we're going to be talking about here today. Rolling Hills on the north side of Tempe, excuse me, and then also we have Ken McDonald on the south side of Tempe. All right, we are going to be covering here today 4 main things. We're going to be providing Steve and myself an update on the Golf Enterprise Fund and then Golf Tempe in general. We're going to be talking through golf's capital needs at the golf courses, and then also speak about school golf and the relationships we have with some of the local schools. And then we're going to make some recommendations on those last 2 points as well. And certainly we'll be happy to take any questions as we go throughout, but also as we make recommendations, there'll be a chance for feedback at that point. Placing this discussion within the larger picture of council strategic priorities and also the performance measures, we want to first off really focus on performance measure 127 that relates to our compliance with national standards or industry standards with replacement and maintenance of assets within the city. Certainly with golf, this is both living and non-living infrastructure. And then also on 316, that has to do with the community survey results and how our community feels, whether they're satisfied or very satisfied with the recreational facilities that we provide, specifically within golf. And very happy to announce that at our last customer community survey back in 2017, we ranked 20% above the national average. And to add to that also, Golf Advisor takes ongoing feedback from customers, folks who actually play the golf courses as well, whether they would recommend or not recommend the course. And historically, close to 1,000 votes. We are in the high 80s for both golf courses, and over the last 12 months, happy to report that we are actually in the low to mid 90s for both golf courses as well. So both internally with our community and then also with our customers that play that may be part of other communities that come in as well, certainly have some good remarks. Would like to also place our Tempe Golf within the context of the larger municipal market for golf. There are 19 golf courses, believe it or not, that are actually on municipal land that's either owned by, operated by, or leased by municipalities throughout 6 cities in the Valley Metro area, with 2 main business models. The first is what we call the lease agreements. The 5 City of Scottsdale courses that you may or may not be familiar with. The TPC has 2 courses that are actually on City of Scottsdale land. Bear Creek and Chandler, 2 in Glendale, and then 2 recently have changed business models within the City of Phoenix the last few years. We have Papago, and then also what is now the GCU course, or it used to be Maryville Golf Course. And these are really owned and maintained by the private entity, and then revenues come back to the municipalities in the form of rent or lease payments, and it really depends on the agreements that are agreed upon between municipalities and the lessees. And then also we have the operation or the business model the City of Tempe operates under, which is the public-private partnership model. Mesa's Dobson Ranch is very similar to ours, as well as the other 6 municipal courses that you may know of over in the City of Phoenix, the Encantos, Cave Creek, Aguilas, and so on. Within this business model, there are shared operations and maintenance responsibilities between the private industry and then also our partner and also the municipalities. And revenue typically is shared and varies by agreement. Our agreement specifically states that the city receives revenues for greens fees, golf cart rentals, and driving range fees, where our partner golf, Gemini Golf, receives revenues through management partnership payment that we make monthly, and then also they receive all food and beverage sales and miscellaneous sales through the pro shops and also through instruction.
Question, does the City of Phoenix operate a Papago Park golf course?
It is now operated through ASU.
Through ASU.
Yeah, through a lease.
How close is it to Rolling Hills?
It is pretty close. It's just it's within the Papago Park footprint, so it's pretty close. The main difference is they have an 18-hole championship course and an executive course, so a little bit different in the size.
It's night and day. Papago, Rolling Hills is more of an executive par 3.
Shorter course,
It's
correct.
a shorter course. Papago, actually, we've had the LPGA, they had tournaments there, and they're redoing it to the standards of.
Collegiate.
No, they're doing it to the standards.
They put a lot of money into the clubhouse.
They just put it, last time I was there, it was like a
Karsten,
little.
but it's going to be, it's a little.
Correct. And similarly, GCU has also put in quite a considerable amount of money over at.
That's right.
At Maryville as well.
The Maryville one, right?
Correct. Yep. All right, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Steve White, who'll be talking through some of the Golf Fund history.
Thank you, Craig. Mayor and Council, this slide shows the evolution of Tempe Golf, including major construction projects and the funding sources. Both golf courses were originally constructed using contributed capital from the general fund, Rolling Hills starting in the 1950s and Ken McDonald in the 1970s. Both courses remained funded by the general fund for operating expenses and capital projects until 1983. At that time, golf became an enterprise fund, with user fees paying the operating expenses, capital projects, as well as remaining debt payments. It's important to note that from 2008 to 2016, there were no CIP projects. The next slide shows the historical ability of the Golf Fund to fund its capital projects with golf revenues. The orange bars represent annual investment in capital projects, including payment of debt for previous construction. The blue line represents the annual operating surplus or deficit. The main takeaway here is that in the years that the Golf Fund had high capital investment, as shown by the taller orange bars, the fund operated in a deficit, indicating that revenues were not sufficient to cover both operating expenses and CIP. From 2008 to 2016, as mentioned earlier, there were no CIP projects undertaken, as shown by the absence of orange bars. This resulted in significant deferred maintenance of assets similar to what we have seen in our parks, streets, and buildings. Even when all capital projects had ceased in 2008, the fund continued to operate in a deficit, meaning that user revenues were now insufficient to cover even operating expenses. In 2011, a new business model was implemented to bring the fund back into balance. This included several significant changes, such as diversifying revenue sources, as Craig has talked about earlier, hiring a new golf concessionaire with an emphasis on the customer experience, as well as implementing a new pricing structure. This chart is from the February 2018 long-range forecast and shows a gradual growth in revenues, the blue line, accompanied by an increase in the number of golf rounds, the green line. The slight declines in revenue and rounds starting in fiscal year 15-16 was due to the temporary closure of Rolling Hills for the construction of an irrigation project. In the new model, we're happy to report that revenues are sufficient to cover annual operating expenses and minor improvements. As a point of comparison, the City of Phoenix and the City of Mesa, which operate under a similar private-public business model as Craig described earlier, have not been self-sustaining with golf revenues. Finally, for this slide, this 5-year forecast to fiscal year 2022 projects continued small annual surpluses, but it's important to understand that the surpluses do not assume major capital improvements and the accumulated deferred maintenance.
Steve, as I mentioned during the introduction and realizing that our last update was back in 2012, we certainly could have done a better job communicating both an update on the Golf Fund, but also some of the capital needs for both golf courses. The chart on the slide that is up now shows some of those needs that are really are identified both in a long term over the next 10 years, but also there's some more immediate needs over the next couple of years identified within this. It's important to note that one thing that is missing from this slide is a complete renovation of the Ken McDonald Clubhouse. We had started some pre-RFP public outreach back in the end of 2016 to gauge some resident and also golf user feedback before we were looking at a public-private partnership model to see what options were available to actually renovate that clubhouse from that perspective. Since that time, we've actually focused very necessarily on our golf fund and also our management partnerships. But I anticipate over the next 12 to 18 months, we will certainly continue to strengthen that relationship with Gemini Golf, but then start these conversations back up So what is listed here does not specifically identify or list anything related to the clubhouse renovation over at Kent McDonald Clubhouse.
Councilman Cubey?
Quick question, I'm thinking of the resident complaint we had about the intercom system waking people up in the surrounding environment. Has a new system been employed?
It is not so far. We've reached out to some vendors to see what opportunities they have. Other municipalities are hiring, well, other golf courses, we've done some research, are hiring folks to stay at the first tee. We typically don't announce anything early in the mornings, is the route that we've worked through specifically for that. So, but we've researched different options, and there really is a couple different options available. One is hiring people, and then a lot of municipalities, Mesa still uses the intercom as well, and is in a residential area.
Aren't there systems that restaurants employ for reservations where you just get, you know, a vibrating buzzer or something?
They are, to my knowledge.
Yeah, but yeah.
Obviously not.
That's something we could work on, but yeah, there's other ways that we could help do it, you know, but.
Cool, you can do it. It would work. It would work.
I haven't heard that. Yeah, there's other ways that we can help notify golfers who's on deck and so forth.
Because it is apparently pretty loud, and it does happen in the morning where people get roused from sleep.
Need to pay attention.
Okay.
It's like the roosters that aren't supposed to be there.
Much like what Steve mentioned, understanding what some peer cities that have similar business models do, not just with the operating side, but also with the capital improvement side, is an important piece. The city of Mesa is having very similar discussions at the staff level. Dobson Ranch is very similar in age to Kent McDonald, so they have some of the same infrastructure needs, so they've not determined a course of action for golf capital projects, but the city of Phoenix does fund their capital projects, some capital projects on the public-private partnership side through their park CIP.
I would encourage you, and I would ask council, when they come up for the next year of budget in our CIP, this is like a park for us, so if there's another amenity, it's an asset. So it needs to be in line when we start ranking some of the projects when we go through our CIP, it's important to make sure that some of those projects that you just outlined on this slide, that at least we get the attention for the council so we can make a decision of how we can disperse some of those CIP funds.
I think an important distinction to make with capital projects that Steve mentioned on the previous slide, my last one, is the difference between funding minor versus major projects. Minor projects, as displayed by some of the pictures on the left-hand side, are relatively minor, less significant in scope, impact, and cost. They're ones like we've made some improvements this fiscal year over at both the Kent McDonald and Rolling Hills Clubhouse landscaping. These are really important first touches, but relatively minor stuff that our staff can do. And then there is some minor sod improvements that we can make and that we have made over the last couple of years, specifically at Kent McDonald, and some more minor ones over at Rolling Hills as well. These are ones that we believe that we can fund through and continue to fund through the Golf Enterprise Fund. As compared to the major projects on the right, this is the full irrigation renovation over at Rolling Hills back in the summer of 2016. Was certainly significant in cost, impact, and also in scale. It shut the golf course down for 6 months as we went over to a more efficient irrigation system, but also as we added a water retention pond so we could pump irrigation, transitioning from potable water over to canal water at that point. This is just an example of one of the major projects as identified within golf, is a full irrigation renovation. All right, now I'd like to transition over to school golf. We have enjoyed a really friendly relationship with local schools, with the city of Tempe, but we unfortunately really haven't had any written policies as it relates to how that looks and plays out. Those schools on the right-hand side of this slide receive free range use, for use of the golf course for practice, as somebody would fly standby, kind of not get in the way of paying customers, but they do reserve tee times for any of the matches for home schools or for home matches. There are 9 schools that we support currently or that utilize the golf courses. 6 are within Tempe and 3 outside of Tempe, and it's both spring, fall, and over at Kent McDonald and Rolling Hills golf courses. And we certainly understand historically that though there hasn't been any written policy, Tim Maddox with the clerk's office did a fantastic job going back to the mid-'70s, finding minutes from council meetings about generally supporting school golf, but it really wasn't defined on how that would actually look.
One of the things, I'm in favor of your recommendation that we need to have an agreement. I'm surprised at how this has happened without us knowing. But I would tell you that I'm all in favor of coming in agreement and keeping the Tempe schools harmless like we have. But the ones that are outside Tempe, I think we need to come up with some type of fee structure.
Wait, I would take that a step further, and I would say though too, I mean, I really do think that our Tempe schools, our Tempe students should kind of take precedent too. And I know time is a lot of it, because they probably want to be on the course at the same time. I mean, golf season starts the middle of August and it ends probably like towards the end of October. And so I think you got to take both those things into consideration, because I really do think that, you know, I feel like it's an asset first and foremost, and the ability for young people to learn a sport that they're going to have for the rest of their lives. I mean, I actually, McDonald was my home golf course when I played for McClintock High School. So I love the photo.
Wait, is that you in there?
That definitely is not me. No, that's definitely not me. They've come a long way since we were playing. So
Now we have color. We have black and white back.
yeah, well, anyway, it's pretty funny. So I would say that I think we need to kind of look at the non-Tempe schools and see how that works, not only with paying fees, but actually the time and the commitment, because we only have 2 golf courses. And you got to take that into consideration. And I would definitely hold them harmless and be respectful to any agreement. But I think for the management company to somehow work with them too, to realize that when you want to go into a partnership with another school or something different than what we're seeing, that maybe that needs to run through staff before it happens, because this probably shouldn't have happened.
It definitely needs to run through staff.
That's certainly understandable, and that's why we're here, making you aware of it, and also that, you know, our commitment was we get to the recommendations is really tighten up some controls, making sure that we understand what the parameters are. But we understand the opportunities for improvement are exactly that, putting some.
And it was my understanding too. I mean, I don't think golf's on the weekends. School golf. They're usually not there on the weekends. They don't really host any tournaments. I mean, they may host a match, but you're talking what, 5 tee times? So it's really, to me, I think what the use isn't overly excessive by any means. And I think the value that you get being a young person and being able to, you know, learn a sport is way more valuable.
Councilman Granville?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just going to echo the very thing that you were going to say, Mayor, and Councilmember Arredondo Savage, and that is, I really see it as sort of the equivalent of in-state and out-of-state tuition. We have an obligation to Tempe, you know, students and Tempe schools, and so I would say continue with those relationships where those are, you know, at no cost. And as it relates to other cities' residents, I wouldn't say full cost recovery, and I would defer to staff to come up with a number, but something between 0 and full cost recovery seems more appropriate to me, so that it strikes a better balance of encouraging, you know, growth in the sport while still understanding that there's a preferred relationship with Tempe schools.
I'm curious, does the school districts charge the kids
I think that it's an activity fee.
an activity fee?
It's pretty minimal.
Well, yeah.
Areas,
Yeah.
other fees.
And I think Tempe High's home course is actually Rolling Hills.
Not according to this.
Who's that, but
They may
change it, we
actually
don't know.
use both, depending, so I think you may be right.
So I think
Yeah,
if there's any other comments from the council, but I think that the direction from the council, if I'm listening to everyone, is formalize the agreements with the school districts, hold the Tempe schools harmless as we have been. We still need to have an agreement with the school district. It's also good to let the school district know, say, hey, we're partnering with you. We haven't been doing this for years. We don't charge you a fee, but at the same time, I think it's good that they understand that. And then for the non-Tempe schools, if it's the council's pleasure to come create some kind of structure for a fee.
if there's space for that.
If there's space. But our priority is the Tempe schools first.
And out of curiosity, I'm just wondering what the other cities are doing with their fee structure for those schools.
Yeah.
So you got some Phoenix schools and you have some Chandler schools in there. And I know the proximity on looking at the schools that's probably their closest golf course. But if the golf course that's not the second furthest way, if they're charging, then maybe we should figure out a structure of what we're doing.
Do you know off the top of your head, I mean, obviously we have some agreement or unwritten agreement with the schools too when it comes to swimming? Because I know they utilize our facilities, so I think it would just be wise to at least take a look at that and see how that works.
I think that's a good point. There's a bigger discussion with community service with the recreation on,
I'm not
I
gonna
know
leave
that
it
sand
up.
volleyball has become a big sport, reservations just in general, so that's a discussion we'll certainly have with.
Yeah, but I'm definitely open to holding them harmless and just taking care of our own.
You have enough direction, or does anyone else have any comments?
Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Granville.
Thank you. One last comment. One other thing, and this isn't a big deal, but if we could just include something in those agreements about us being a sponsor of the school's sports, maybe a logo or something on a shirt or something. It's not a big deal, but realistically, we've been doing this for free for many decades. And it seems like at the very least, there should be some, provisional acknowledgement that this is a benefit that the city of Tempe is providing to these schools.
I don't know about a logo, but I think it's, when I made my comment earlier, Councilman Granville, was like, I think we need to, when we do formalize the agreement, we just need to let the school district know and the school board know that, hey, we're working in partnership with you, because I know that usually the school districts, they have their own logos with their own mascot and so forth.
Sure. I'm just thinking when they do pamphlets, when they do all this sort of typical sponsorship stuff, that we would be listed as a sponsor of the school golf programs. Again, it's not a big deal to me one way or the other, but realistically, we are sponsoring them.
Right.
By providing these at no cost.
Mayor,
Vice Mayor?
I don't look at it as a sponsorship. I look at it as a partnership, which to me is a little bit different. So
Okay.
I'm definitely not feel like that's necessary. I mean, if they want to sport our logo, we'll be more than happy to give them a copy of it. But that's my 2 cents.
I'm obligated to say power it is.
All right. Yes, Councilman Cubey.
We have plans for adapting, renovating, building a new golf house at Rolling Hills.
There haven't been any discussions so far about specifically doing
I
that.
have concerns about that, but I
No,
guess
I was going to say the same thing, and the same thing at Ken McDonald. That has to rise on the CIP in the future, and parking. Because the way that parking is, it's almost kind of, wish you could get rid of that putting, the putting green, the practice. I'm not saying get rid of it, but move it, and then be able to create some more parking, because I think we have some seniors, and it's hard. It's a long walk.
The distance.
For people
definitely.
to get there, and I think we need to be respectful for that. I don't even think we have that many handicap spots. So, I mean, I think we have to take that all into consideration, because it is a missed opportunity when we don't have solid clubhouses that we can use for other
I'm
things.
finished, but
Oh, sorry, Laura.
I kind of disagree. I'm worried about having to make a substantial CIP investment in building a clubhouse at Rolling Hills when we have this Papago Park Reserve and master plan, and we might think about at some point, if it comes to that point where we have to do it, think about investing those funds and building an education part.
We just redid the restaurant not too long ago.
We've made some minor improvements.
Right.
Just, I mean,
But
I
not
think,
at the scale of a full renovation.
Lawrence
It's worried
point,
that just sort of
right.
creeps in, and then suddenly we're looking.
Well,
that's gonna
there
be a
has
whole-
been discussions for a clubhouse and reconfiguration actually at Ken McDonald through
Right,
the arts and through the Parks, Recreation, and Golf Committee, and there have been some discussions about that, addressing the concerns with the parking. And I think we should really amp up the 3P process with that. I think could be some opportunities for that to partner with someone to help build that, other restaurant operators. Because actually, it's one of the better. Believe it or not, it's on a canal bike path.
It is
Western
a
Canal,
great
and
location.
it's got a great price for breakfast
does.
for
But it is old.
for the residents. But it does need to have.
Or,
I'm talking about Ken McDonald. I'm
Right.
not talking about
I'm
Rolling
saying
Hills.
that, yeah, at some point, I'm looking at the trajectory of golf adoption or play. We might want to take a look at it and see if there's a better public use of that spot, considering there is another golf course relatively close by where you could have some sort of shared agreement with City of Phoenix. I'm not suggesting now, but at some point, long-term, you might want to think about looking at the Papago Park master plan. And I know eventually a lot of us would like to see an outdoor education center, or something that has significant public use that relates to the celebrating Papago Park.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's some stipulations on what we can do with that anyway, but I will tell you, the golf courses are night and day. I mean, they're completely two different golf courses for two different types of an experience based on what they want. I am a firm believer and a supporter of that being a clear asset and for our community, for a really affordable recreation opportunity. And I think sometimes, I mean, I'm not saying never, because I know better than to say that, but right now I would say no. I mean, I don't think that we want to do that. I think that, Rolling Hills is used by a lot of our residents that really do appreciate the fact that it's a little bit shorter, it's easier to access, the parking's a little bit closer. So, I mean, I think you'd have to take that all into consideration, but definitely that wouldn't be something I would support right now. But 100% I would certainly support the idea of really remodeling the clubhouse at Ken McDonald. I mean, it does look almost identical as to when I went to high school, which was really just a couple years ago. But, but I would say, yeah, what? Anyway, more of that. Anyway, I would say that's got to rise to the level of whether we do some public-private partnerships, we work on, the reconfiguration, but it is a serious missed opportunity that we have not invested into that clubhouse. Not just for the people that are there, but I think for our residents, they would love it to be able to go and get, breakfast on a weekend or dinner in the evening. I think we really need to focus on that in the future.
Great. So our formal recommendation then is on the school golf is to really continue supporting schools, formalize agreements, put some policies and parameters, and then also, as I've heard, look at continuing to support Tempe schools the way that we are, and then the non-Tempe schools, identifying what possible costs could be to make sure it's reasonable, but also make sure that we're structuring those agreements as well. We're giving priority to Tempe schools.
I would say too, I take it a step further, like I mentioned, is make sure that you're not trying to cram too many schools, and then all of a sudden, our schools are the ones that are suffering because we brought schools from the outside. So I think it's not just about a fee structure. I think it's just about scheduling.
And then we also have a recommendation on the capital side, and we looked at 3 different options. One was fully funding through the golf fund, both operations, maintenance, and capital, both the minor and major projects. We unfortunately think in order to do that, we'd have to raise the price of golf at both golf courses to where we wouldn't be really providing community-based golf, and also outpricing ourselves from our market competitors. Okay. So we don't recommend that option.
Councilman Katie?
Never mind. If you don't recommend it, it answers my question.
Repeat that.
So that was one of the options. I'd like to, and probably didn't do a good job at the beginning of just saying we considered multiple options before making our recommendation. That was the first, is seeing if we could fully fund it. To do so, we believe we'd really outprice ourselves from community-based golf and also our competitors. The second was much like what the City of Phoenix has done, supplement some of the operation maintenance from the general fund, but also providing capital projects from the general fund. We believe that we can be self-sustaining through the golf fund for operations and maintenance and minor projects, so we don't believe that this is an option to subsidize O&M through the general fund at all, but at least it was an option that we've considered. What we recommend is a hybrid approach where we would continue to fund operations and maintenance for both golf courses as well as minor projects through the golf fund. But we would recommend major capital projects be funded through the general obligation bonds, repaid through the secondary property tax. And Mayor, as you mentioned earlier, they would have to compete against other projects depending on the fund that they would be placed.
Our job.
Correct, and that they would have to compete. We would likely identify as many as we could in years 6 through 10 now, so they wouldn't compete against any current ones, but there are some more immediate needs on the tune of about $235,000 that may be possibly cash funded.
In terms of, we talked about, Rolling Hills and Kim McDonald's. One of the things that I want to shed some light on, not forget, we were just named one of the top spots to retire with some of the projects that we have from housing. That information should be used with our marketing and with the golf contractors that we have at Kim McDonald and Rolling Hills to really advertise the, tourism, a place for, cost-efficient recreation opportunities for not only seniors, but for tourism. So that's a really good marketing push that we should do that's affordable. It's in the center of the valley. It's in a desert preserve. And that's part of the reason why it's there. It's to preserve the desert, the natural habitat. So that's one thing I don't want to lose sight of, that we should really be using from our marketing standpoint to get with the golf operators of the pro shops to really push that advertising out there.
And we've got a great internal team with Nikki Ripley.
Especially with the Tempe Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Yeah, marketing is a big piece of ensuring that everybody knows what we have to offer, both the residents and not.
How often can you golf and hear the zoo right next door?
I know.
It's really pretty cool.
In the beautiful Papago
in your backswing
area, certainly.
Aurora.
Aurora, and it's pretty great.
So,
well, and welcome to Gemini Golf too, right? So
correct.
Thank you.
It's been great to have them on board.
Yep, thank you.
Does option 3 seem like a supportable
I
option
agree.
then? Great. Excellent.
Clear?
Thank you very much.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
your
you,
time.
guys.
Thank you.
All right, next item. Council Code of Conduct. We have, I know Ms. Baumann, our city attorney. And I think Rini Broderick.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council.
Just to reiterate for the public, the City Council adopted a code of conduct back in 2009, and part of the adoption of that code of conduct included some of the personnel rules that were in place at the time that would be applicable to council members. The code of conduct was updated in 2017 by the council. And at the last work study session, the council asked for a draft resolution to update the code of conduct to adopt the most recent version of the personnel rules in 2008. An updated language in the ethics in our workplace handbook. And the council may consider, but it's certainly not obligated to, consider a potential charter amendment that would be referred to the voters that would allow for additional penalties. At present, the code of conduct provides for penalties up to a censure. Pardon me. At the last work study session, council requested information on various standards of review, and that has been provided for you in your packet. We are now just seeking the council's direction on the draft resolution. There's a second draft resolution concerning the charter amendment for your consideration as well.
All right, so I think just to check off one of the issues is, I think that we all agree as a council that we're going to update our personal rules and council code of conduct because we just updated it and it's more of a house cleaning, if I'm understanding, to do the resolution.
Correct.
Okay. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, so we could check that off our list. And then the next one is any discussion on the latter.
And just for purposes of clarification, either resolution or both would need to come to the council at a regular council meeting for approval. That would be next week.
Anyone? Yes, Councilman Navarro.
Thanks, Mayor. Where was this, how we're going about things, where does this lie between cities of how, like Phoenix, Mesa, Chandler, how do they run their council, so to speak, in terms of disciplinary or even removal?
Sure. Pardon me. Thank you. Mesa has an option for removal from office and additional penalties, and they have some pretty detailed procedural guidelines that I've included. And they ran through this scenario when former council member Winkle recently was brought up and considered by their city council. On Mesa's, in Mesa's charter and in Mesa's procedures, they have a requirement that 5 or more council members consider the weight of the evidence, and they use a preponderance of the evidence standard. Phoenix very recently submitted a charter amendment to their voters that would allow for members of the council to seek removal of office for another council member. And the proposal that has not yet been voted on by their residents would require 5 council members, and they're looking at a clear and convincing evidence standard for forfeiture of office.
Councilman Keating?
For the non-lawyers in the room, can you explain the difference between those two standards of evidence?
Sure, I will do my best. So the preponderance of the evidence is really just your basic civil standard, which means more probable than not. It's like 51%, if you will. And the clear and convincing evidence standard is higher than that. It basically requires some proof, some evidence that something did occur, that it was reasonably more likely to occur than it did not occur.
And some of that, though, just to be clear, with the updating of our code of conduct that we did with employees and the ones we just did that we're going to look at a resolution, anything that would happen, the first thing is you have to be, based on the agreement, based on our update, is that there would be an investigation of whatever issues that there's going to be a thorough investigation. So that report, the findings of any type of investigation would come back to the council. Is that accurate?
Sure,
so it's
sure.
not like you're doing it, because someone doesn't, if there's a situation, we hope there isn't one in the future, but there's a situation where someone's in some act is in question, obviously the first thing we would do is ask for an investigation through our city manager.
Sure, there's actually a step even prior to that.
Prior
There are
to
a
that.
couple of layers
Yeah,
of
it has to be a complaint. Okay.
review. And so the initial
can't just
complaint would
kick
be
someone.
sent for an initial screening. And the initial screening basically just says, does it even fall within the code of conduct, whatever was alleged. If what was alleged, if true, could violate the code of conduct, then it would be referred on for a further inquiry, and then an investigation would be undertaken. So it could stop at that first level as well.
Okay. Anybody else? Anyone else have any comments? So we're all moving forward with the resolution to update our council code of conduct. Vice Mayor?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of got some mixed feelings in regards to moving forward. I mean, I certainly respect the will of the voters, but I guess I think Darlene brought it up in regards to the wording and making sure our wording's right in the sense of, I think the one thing that's different when it comes to our personal code of conduct is that our residents are the ones that elected into office. And so would it be wise to get some feedback at some point other than today in regards to the wording or concerns or anything like that, just to either get some more buy-in or address other concerns that are out there. So I don't know how else our residents would know that this is being impacted. And the reason why I say that is because, ultimately they're the ones that put us here. And I don't want to, and I do want to clarify too that we are not removing the ability for a recall. Because I know
Right.
that was brought up. I think that's
It's
really
always there.
important. And I think somebody else brought up the idea of an appeal process. So I don't know if that's something that we would even consider, but I'm certainly open to getting a little bit more input. But I would leave it up to the council and see how you feel.
Councilman Navarro? And Councilman Keating?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And yeah, no, I agree to that. I think that, definitely a third party removing the council from anything that we're deciding on. They mentioned there was boards of people that could be, somewhat selected with a variety of different backgrounds, and maybe it's always changing, type of thing. And then selection of that, I don't know how you go through that, but I think a more in-depth possible thought on using those outside groups to help formulate, a decision or disciplinary or some sort of utilization of that. The other thing is, I know that we talked about censorship and there's always the part of evidence that has to be very conclusive, so to speak. So it's just not a random, you know what, I think you did this, this, and this. No, it has to be thoroughly vetted and investigated. And I like what Phoenix is doing to make sure that it's on a higher standard to where it's no doubt, so to speak, to where it can rise to the occasion of what the council can do. The thing of possibly even 3 censorships and it's like a 3-strike you're out type of thing, that's another possibility of does that have teeth to it? And then the evaluation on that, once again, maybe goes back to a board. So I think a discussion on that would be, helpful for sure.
Councilman Keating?
Thank you, Mayor. To me, this is a question of, what kind of city do we want to be? Are we a city in which our elected officials can continually violate our code of conduct, a document meant to outline our values, prescribe a minimum level of civility towards each other with impunity? Or are we a city that demands the same level of accountability from our elected officials that we demand from our police and firefighters? Other cities like Phoenix and Mesa are leading the way on this issue, making similar updates because their residents, like ours, want more accountability, not less. This is not unusual or an extreme. In fact, it put us more in line with our peer cities. It certainly doesn't take away the citizens' rights to organize and execute a recall, nor does it make council members the subject of political wins or groupthink, as was put earlier. And merely this outlines a process to give the code of conduct the same level of enforcement as it does for everyone under its jurisdiction. So I love Councilmember Navarro's suggestion of maybe a 3-strike system here. Looking at it, where maybe the first violation of the code of conduct, the maximum penalty is a censure. The second violation of a code of conduct, the maximum penalty is a censure. And the third code of conduct violation, then we can take a look at a supermajority vote for removal from office. And this will give us the same amount of accountability that we demand from our employees, and I think that our residents are seeking from elected officials these days.
Councilman Shriver?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to return to the discussion about level of evidence that we had last time, and Judy gave us some data back on the other cities, and Joel just mentioned without a doubt. And just to be clear, I mean, a preponderance of evidence, like she said, it's a coin flip. It's like whichever side has a little bit more evidence and the other side wins. Clear and convincing would be a step higher than that, but what Joel's referring to, without a doubt, the law referred to as beyond a reasonable doubt, would be even a step higher than clear and convincing evidence. Is that right, Judy?
Would be correct.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear that clear and convincing and beyond a reasonable doubt are not the same thing. Beyond a reasonable doubt would be a higher standard. I would not support a preponderance of the evidence standard. I don't think we should do this on a coin flip kind of a thing. The three strikes thing is interesting to me as well. The concern I have that I share with some of the folks that spoke earlier is when you talk about our police and firefighters or other city employees, for example, they are hired by the city. If they were ever to lose their jobs, they'd be fired by the city, by other city employees. I mean, ultimately up the food chain to Andrew. They're evaluated by the same people in that food chain. We are hired by the voters. And so for someone other than the voters to evaluate us or remove us, it's not really the same thing as other employees. So you got what I'm saying? Like, I think that folks who are in charge of hiring should be in charge of firing, generally, which is why I think the recall process exists. Now that said, the recall process is quite difficult. It's a very, very high bar. You have to get a lot of signatures in a relatively short period of time in order to put a recall on the ballot, and then the city has to pay to conduct an election. And whoever's on either side of whether or not that person should be recalled has to spend money, in theory, campaigning. I mean, that is a long and arduous process. I don't know that, what year did our recall process, was it created, or was it in the original charter?
I believe it was in the original charter, and I'm thinking 1964, but I could be mistaken.
And so the number of signatures that would have been required back then, given the population of Tempe, would have been minuscule compared to the number of signatures that are required today in order to recall someone. And so I think part of my consideration here is like, is our recall process modern? Or is it more difficult than the people who created it envisioned it being, given the high signature burden? And so that pushes me back to the other side of thinking that maybe we should consider having a process where the council can do this. So my feedback at this stage is, if we are to do it, I agree with the three strikes. If we are to do it, I think we have to have a standard above preponderance of the evidence, either clear and convincing or beyond a reasonable doubt. And I do think it would need to be a supermajority of the council.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Cubey.
So in response to some of the comments we heard from the members of the public, I want to make clear that no one's suggesting that this be applied retroactively, and this isn't about targeting a certain member of the council. But I do want to just bring us back in time to previous investigations where we did discipline a council member, and we had, and I agree with you, we need to have 5 council members approved, but it was a very rigorous investigation and discussion in a public way about those behaviors, and there weren't even unanimous votes, I don't believe. In one case, I voted against the letter of reprimand, and we weren't even looking at the highest, the highest form of punishment, which at that time is censure. So we're not talking about applying this retroactively, but I think it's important to note that there's sometimes, and maybe we've seen it with recent public awareness of sexual misconduct issues, you may not get to that point where you get an indictment or you get somebody to be charged with a crime because the victims sometimes do not come forward, and that's the whole sort of crux of the Me Too movement. So you can talk about that's not clear and convincing if there's one person saying one thing, but when you have a pattern, you have one person and another person, then you start to see more clear and convincing evidence. So I do agree with you that we should go to a clear and convincing evidence standard, although you said that or the other.
Or beyond a reasonable doubt.
Beyond reasonable doubt, though, that's criminal conviction, and that to me would be applied when you'd have a criminal indictment. But I think this is serious, and we need to rise to the occasion. We're seeing cities in our own state do this, Mesa, Phoenix, and I think we need to really think about this seriously and know that there's certain standards of behavior that we need to hold ourselves up to. And in any of the discussions we've had with the reprimands that we issued last year or 2 years ago, I mean, we didn't do that easily. It was a very thorough investigation. It was very heartfelt discussions that we had. That wasn't an easy time for our council. wasn't something we relished doing. It was very painful, in fact. But I think we need to really consider this, and we're not discussing whether to adopt the code of conduct. We're talking about placing on the ballot a ballot initiative that the voters can decide, and we can. The 3 strikes thing wouldn't necessarily have to be in the ballot initiative, right? That would be part of an ordinance. Is that right? If we discuss the 3 strikes idea that's come up, because there could be, 1 or 2 really serious charges. And
I think the council would have the
a little bit
option.
to do the 3 strikes. What?
I think the council would have the option to choose to put it in the charter. Typically, a charter does not contain very detailed information.
Yeah.
It's more of the broad
That's what I thought.
authority.
I think it should be broad.
Councilman Shapiro. Thank you, Mayor. Lauren, remind me of another issue that I just want to touch on, and Mr. Martinez touched on it in his comments as well. We talked about Don Shooter's example, and I just want to be clear about that kind of an example, and I think it weighs into this conversation, is I think Don Shooter absolutely should have been removed from the legislature. I think they ultimately did the right thing. My concern is with the process, and when I was involved in, when I was sitting as a judge in those ethics hearings for Scott Bungard, we actually went through a robust evidentiary process. And if you're going to reach something like a clear and convincing standard, you have to have a robust process. The problem with what happened with Shooter was they didn't follow the process. They didn't go through a robust, frankly, they did not have a due process, which our Constitution guarantees. And so I just want to make sure that we have due process ingrained in whatever it is we decide here. Now, I agree with Judy, that may not belong in the charter, but maybe it does belong in whatever ordinance language that comes forward, and I think that's just something we need to be cognizant of, that if we're going to have a clear and convincing evidence standard, there has to be a robust evidentiary process where due process is granted to the individual.
Councilman Keating?
I absolutely agree with what Councilmember Shapiro just said and what Councilmember Kuby said about adopting a clear and convincing standard of evidence. Councilmember Shapiro said he'd want to see a supermajority required. I absolutely agree with that. That should, that should be without question. Yeah. I forgot what I was going to say now after I said I had to agree. I had another point that I had to make. Crap, I'll come back to it. Somebody else talk.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Granville.
So it might surprise people a little bit for me to say this, but I conceptually agree that that there should be a process for removal of council members in our charter outside of what we have right now, which is a criminal conviction. The reason I don't support this at this time, and I'm disappointed, I actually reached out to Councilmember Keating, and it might have been under open meeting law, he couldn't respond, but he didn't, that I don't think this is it, is for a pretty simple reason, and that is, I think whatever the removal reason should be, both the standard of evidence and the clearly delineated reasons for removal should be in the city charter. And the concern that I have with this is that we're putting in generally that that you can be removed from office and then referring to the code of conduct. The code of conduct is it's a document that the residents won't even know what they're voting on. So they could vote for the removal of office, but not know what it is that gets you removed from office because they won't know what's in the code of conduct. And so I think if we gave them, I think conceptually this is a good idea. I just think it's not ready. And I think if we gave them clear things, like as Councilmember Kuby mentions, something related to sexual assault or misconduct or whatever the sort of, and I think there is precedence for that. If you look in our charter under discrimination, we delineate the things that you can't discriminate about, right? Gender, race, sexual orientation, and gender identity. And so I don't think it's inherently different that we wouldn't list out those same things that maybe don't rise to the level of criminal action, but certainly don't reflect the values of our community. And I think we could list those out in a charter amendment. And so then residents would know, yeah, these are the sort of things we wouldn't want someone doing, as opposed to what we have right now, which is sort of a general statement that refers to our code of conduct, which candidly I think is in some ways vague, that even after the investigation, the council doesn't have to adopt the recommendations of the investigation. The investigation could say nothing here, and council could say, yeah, well, we think there is, and they could vote yes. I think that's concerning. So I think this is an idea that could come to fruition, and I think it's appropriate for it to come to fruition, but not necessarily in the form that we have it right now.
Councilman Keating and Councilman Kuby, because he remembered what he...
Yeah, I just remember what I was going to say earlier. You know, really what this comes down to is we're just asking simply to put the question to the voters, should we have the authority to set up a clear, fair, and fair process that adopts a very high legal standard that I think the residents of the city of Tempe expect us to do. I'm glad to hear that Councilmember Granville is, at least in theory, in support of some sort of framework for removal from office outside of a criminal conviction. So that's very encouraging. So I'm hoping that we can, find a way to get there. I'd like to see a supermajority vote in favor of this to set a good precedent for, moving forward.
Councilman Kuby?
So yeah, just talking about that finite list, that concerns me that Councilmember Granville mentioned, because if we have a finite list that we come up with today, undoubtedly we're going to have to change the charter every single time we think of something new and unimaginable that a council member might do. We'd have to go back to the voters each and every time. So I think it's important, and we see that in our charter language time and time again, that we keep the language general, but serious and responsible, like you mentioned. We were elected and empowered to make decisions about disciplinary actions already. We're already elected and empowered for that. And so what we have now is the ability to consider the appropriate level of discipline for the specific behavior. And there's no reason to assume the process is going to become suspect just because a new level of discipline is possible. Our council has taken these issues very seriously in the past, and I expect that we will continue to look at these issues very seriously and with great responsibility and with public input every single time.
Councilman Schreier?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm thinking maybe there's a middle ground here where we could actually frame a charter amendment that is not overly complex, does not delve into minutia, but still addresses some of these concerns.
Detail.
But I think we could, what if, rather than alluding to the city code of conduct, which in theory could be an amorphous document that's pretty easily amended, what if we said, and I feel like this goes, if you consider the example from Mesa, this would have applied. If you consider Don Shooter, this would have applied. What if it was something more along the lines of that a council member could be removed if found in violation of the Tempe City Charter or having engaged in, and I don't want to create the wording here, I just want to tell you what I want to put in there, but something along the lines of having engaged in clear and convincing evidence of having engaged in unlawful activity. And the reason I phrase it that way is that would not require a conviction, because a criminal conviction, as you said, would require beyond a reasonable doubt. So it would not be the same standard that a court would have to employ in a criminal case. So in other words, a person could be not found guilty in a court of law and still found responsible by this language if there was clear and convincing evidence that they engaged in unlawful activity, as opposed to violating the code of conduct. Maybe that would give our voters a little bit more confidence that this would not be used in a willy-nilly fashion to deal with things that are not part of our legal system, but instead part of an amorphous code of conduct.
Judy?
I was just going to point out the language that Phoenix is proposing be placed on the ballot to facilitate your discussion. They did include some broad areas, which include specificity as to 3/4 of the city council vote required for any violation of ethics, gift, conflict of interest, non-discrimination, or anti-harassment policies. So the
policies
council
was the last
correct.
word?
Can you read that again,
Sure.
please? Thank you.
Ethics, this is 3/4 of the city council. This is proposed in Phoenix. For a violation of their ethics, gift, conflict of interest, non-discrimination, anti-harassment policies as set forth in their city code. So the council could certainly do something like that. It certainly does not have to, but I wanted to point that out for purposes of your discussion.
What about the Mesa Charter one?
Yes, the Mesa Charter was more
No.
detailed and specific.
I mean, I think that the fact that the detail is specific, I'm curious, if you could read it.
The mayor or council member shall forfeit their office if they, 1, lack at any time during their term of office any qualification for the office prescribed by the charter or by law, or 2, violate any express prohibition of the charter. 2, in addition, it shall constitute grounds for forfeiture of office, suspension, censure, reprimand, monetary penalty, letter of warning, other form of discipline, or some combination of the foregoing, at the sole discretion of the city council if 5 or more council members agree that a council member, including the mayor, a citizen advisory board member, etc., violates the mandatory code of ethics for council members and citizen advisory board members adopted by the Mesa City Council by resolution and in effect when the alleged conduct occurred. B, within 2 years.
Mayor?
Hang on a second.
It also includes within.
My apologies.
2 years before their first election or appointment or during their term of office if they were convicted, indicted, arrested, or the subject of a direct criminal complaint regarding a crime involving violence, dishonesty, or sexual misconduct. And then they have some additional things that are typical in a charter, being absent for 3 consecutive meetings without being duly noticed. And they also include engaged in any other conduct demonstrating a lack of fitness for office.
David?
So Mesa's is pretty broad there, but I have a question about Phoenix's. They use the word policies, but then all the things that they're denoting there, ethics, what were they? There were like 3 things on the list.
Ethics, gift, conflict of interest, non-discrimination, anti-harassment.
But then it says specifically from their code.
Correct.
So, yeah, us the lawyers at the table. I mean, when you say things that are in the code, if you violate something in the code, have you committed unlawful activity? Have you engaged in unlawful activity? I mean, the code is the law. I mean, code and law are synonymous, right? So if you do something that violates the city code, have you engaged in unlawful activity?
It depends. There may be violations of the code that are only civil type penalties, a
It's still
nuisance
unlawful.
violation. Perhaps not in the general sense of the word, but
Not
yes.
criminal,
Correct.
but unlawful. So if we said unlawful in our code, we would capture everything Phoenix captured there, would we not?
We would.
Because they're not saying ethics rules in their code of conduct. They're saying ethics rules in their code. So if they have an ethics rule in their code and someone violates that, then they have engaged in unlawful activity.
I have not read their code to see exactly which policies are captured, but it certainly does reference their code.
I think, Councilman Granville?
Thank you. I think the delineation that that maybe you're getting towards, David, is unlawful typically means criminal, not a violation of a code or policy. And so it typically is filed under a sort of different category. That might not be the case with the way that Phoenix did it. One of the things I would suggest, and maybe this is a helpful compromise, maybe it's not. I know that some of the speakers were concerned about how this seemingly is in response to me. I choose to believe that that's not the case, and that there are real things that that are appropriate and inappropriate that council should be able to discuss and work on, and talk about. If there's, I wouldn't want somebody coming into work every day cussing people out, knowing that the worst they could get is a letter of censure. Like that's not right. And so if it would put some of the residents, concerns to rest, my suggestion would be this, is that myself and maybe Councilmember Keating and QB or whoever they think is appropriate, that we work on something where I'm a part of the committee, and we come up with some language that we can come back with, or at least hopefully we can. And that way I can say to residents that are, I appreciate it, or coming to my defense, I can say, look, I think this is appropriate too. And this isn't about me. But that means there has to be, I have to be a part of that process where this was written, which I really wasn't this time. And I really don't think our code of ethics is the document to refer to. I think it's got to be a little more delineated. But if that's something you guys are interested in, I'm happy to sort of be in the boat and work on this, because I think this is an idea that's overdue, just not the way it's currently done.
Councilman Cubie?
I appreciate that suggestion, but I do think that this discussion is of serious enough import that the entire council should be a part of those discussions when they take place.
Oh, I would assume the committee would come back with recommendations. I wouldn't think that we'd be the only ones.
Right, I know you come back, but I just think it's something that we need to all discuss. It's not necessarily one person taking the lead or coming up with a compromise.
When is our, it's in September, isn't it, our retreat?
That's a great idea.
Do it after today.
Wait, when's our retreat? I can't remember. September. Is this something that we should be discussing? We can get more information. We could look at mesas. We could look at some mesas, some of the changing if we wanted to move forward. But I think there's more information that I think we need to have a discussion with. Is that fair?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think typically we've seen, and Councilmember Granville, you've said this so many times since I've been here for 3 years, that generally when people are just pushing it off, like we need more, it's just people just want to kill it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sounds like it was running out the clock here.
Mayor, I'll say, I mean, personally, I don't think there's, we could say that there's more information that we need. I don't think it's a lot more.
Right.
I think that if we had some language that included a clear and convincing evidence standard and was similar to Phoenix's language, where it was designating things that are in the code or in the law, not an amorphous document, I would feel comfortable if staff would come back with language that reflected that. I would feel comfortable voting on that language next week, but that's just me.
I would too.
I would too.
Andrew?
Just in listening to the conversation and being aware of the initial drafting of the Code of Conduct back in 2009, because I'm the one who drafted it. One of the things I think that was clear in the limitation on the censure was that removal was specified in the charter. So some of the things that was mentioned in one of the cities in terms of monetary penalties or things like that, you know, and I would obviously defer to Judy and her staff, but probably the removal piece is the one that requires the charter, the idea that someone would forfeit their office for the result of something. And the concern, when I hear the concern, and I get it about the vagueness of the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct incorporates our personnel rules. Our personnel rules are pretty specific as the types of conduct that can lead to penalties for employees up to and including termination. The issue, I don't think it sounds like, is so much that the Code of Conduct is vague, it's that it can be amended, right? So that in the future, someone could put in you know, charges or specify violations that may seem trivial but could rise to the level of something more. I'd like to believe that you know, our vetting process of how we go about, you know, actually looking at the personnel rules and vetting them through our six-sided partnership, through our management team, through the merit board, et cetera, would militate against that. But getting to what I've heard from a couple of the council members, including Councilmember Shapira, is you could have two things occurring at once, which is you could increase penalties short of termination with respect to the Code of Conduct, and you could refer in the charter, sort of like what Mesa and Phoenix do, to say with clear and convincing, a finding of clear and convincing evidence that council finds that, you know, that if there's a serious misconduct finding based on clear and convincing evidence, that could subject a council member to removal for the following, including but not limited to the following. And you could have a list, but it wouldn't be an exclusive list, because you could find, to Council Member Cubie's point, that in future times, things that you didn't necessarily anticipate could still objectively be found to be serious misconduct. So the standard is the misconduct, the standard of proof is clear and convincing. You have things that I think probably people could agree, and in fact, both Phoenix and Mesa list out the sorts of things that they believed were, and certainly I think that seems like the kind of things you talk about. Criminal convictions, right? That's already in the charter. You talk about conduct that could be, you know, tantamount to a criminal, you know, a violation of criminal law or a breach of someone's ethical duties, right, or something like that. And whatever those things are, you can specify that, say, including not limited to. In which case, you get kind of to both issues, which is how do you incorporate the Code of Conduct, but at the same time create something that has some specificity, but that allows the opportunity for councils, future councils, to say, this is something that we believe meets the standard of, we clearly and convincingly are persuaded that serious misconduct occurred that justifies removal.
So, Mayor, I don't have the charter memorized, but if I remember, doesn't it say, not only does it say criminal conviction, it says a conviction of a crime that involves moral turpitude. Is that right? Isn't that what it currently says?
That's what it currently says.
So, I mean, to Mr. Martinez's earlier point, like, people like Don Shooter, it wasn't just that he may have done something that was unlawful. It was that he may have done something that also involved moral turpitude. And so I think the other fear that I have about the code of conduct is not everything in the code of conduct is sort of in that realm of moral turpitude. And I think, so it's amorphous. I mean, you're right, that is one of my concerns, is that you don't have to go through the same public process to amend the code of conduct that you have to go through to amend the law, to amend the code. Is that true? I mean, is that a fair statement?
Code of conduct is adopted by resolution.
It is.
In which case, the council would have to vote on it at a public meeting.
True. Do you have the same kind of first read, second read process and public comment process?
For resolutions, typically.
Right. So I think there is a distinction there, and it may not seem like a large one, but it's a big enough one to me that I have concerns about using the code of conduct as the standard. I would prefer to go more the route of Phoenix.
That's where I'm.
But in terms of the specificity.
Just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting that the code of conduct would be the reference in the charter. What I was saying is, if you initiate an investigation under the code of conduct process that's in place right now, some code of conduct investigations will result in a finding of no violation. Some will result in a finding that there's a violation, but it's not serious misconduct. And some potentially could result in a finding that, in fact, with clear and convincing evidence, there is serious misconduct. So while the code of conduct may be the vehicle that initiates the inquiry, what the outcome of the inquiry could lead to a finding of serious misconduct. And if that's true, then it really is not so much that the code is amorphous or that it can be changed. It's that you agree in a charter language that goes to the voters that there are things that constitute serious misconduct, some of which you can spell out and some of which you can say that there can still be a finding, including but not limited to. So that can originate why you then come to that conclusion. And it's a conclusion that triggers the penalty and not the code that triggers the penalty.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thoughts?
I really like that. I think that's a great suggestion. I think we apply a great standard to what we're trying to do here. It sounds like it's kind of in the middle of where everyone is right now. Seems to me that, the city manager has a good suggestion.
Vice Mayor?
Mayor?
Mr. Granville?
I'll just jump in one more time on this. I think this is the kind of thing that I understand why. First off, to go to Councilmember Cubey's point, I agree. I share your frustration that sometimes people, at least it seems like, maybe it doesn't really happen, but it seems like they push something off because they like, well, I'll push it off and then the vote won't happen, or it's my problem in 6 months. I reached out 4 months ago to say, hey, matter of fact, I've still got the text message that says there's a version of this I could vote on if you would let me help. I never got a response. And so I wanted to sort of be a part of this process. And this is a charter amendment that could have, decades or dozens of decades worth of ramifications.
Councilman
and
Granville,
if
you are
we're
part
still
of the
figuring it out.
process.
Oh, no, I know I am. And my part of the process is right now saying it's not right the way it is. But there is a right version we could get to. And I would love to help be a part of working with that, with a work group that brings back something different. I don't want people to think that I'm blanketly against this at all. We're rushing this for a deadline. And this is not the kind of thing you want to rush. Because if we get it wrong, it's really hard to fix it later to get it right.
Councilman Kiwi?
Councilmember Granville, it's important to note that this isn't just a delay and let's take this up in another month. It's a huge 2-year delay next time we have a general election and a city council election. And, you know, cities are moving to adapt to modern times, and there are issues before us that were not conceived of 2010, 5 years ago. And I think that the city manager did come up with some language that we're all interested in looking at. And I know I'm not interested in delaying this another 2 years, which is essentially what it is. It's not just to delay it for a few months. And you have been part of this process. We all have. And I'm not sure what you're talking about with the text message that somehow was rebuffed. I don't understand what you're referencing there. But I would like to move forward and find consensus tonight and not lose this opportunity to have to wait two years. I realize that we need to have language that is broad enough, but also is specific enough that it actually can be a useful tool to us, because we do need to have tools that we can use when there are gross violations of our expected standards of behavior.
In Phoenix's, that's coming to a vote in November, and I don't know, Mesa, do they both reference code of conduct in their charter?
They don't. Phoenix, I believe Mesa references their policies. Phoenix is specific to a violation of the city's ethics, gift, conflict of interest, non-discrimination, anti-harassment policies as set forth in the city code.
That's what I just said. So they specifically call out the code of conduct.
Well, they specifically call out certain topics or certain actions.
As it relates to the code of conduct.
Not the code of conduct though, right? The city code.
The city code, and it's not
Policies
encompassing
within
the
their city
entire
code.
city code.
Yeah.
But to Andrew's point, though, the code of conduct is evaluated on, does it rise to the threat of just overwhelming evidence that is violated? To the code of conduct that was probably just not a thoughtful thing to do, but it doesn't rise to the. Am I correct when you're
Right. No, what I was suggesting is that you could have an investigation into a behavior that's alleged about a council member, and you can say, okay, we believe that behavior happens, and we can point to that provision of the code of conduct that would make that a violation of the code. But not every violation of the code rises to the level of being serious misconduct that warrants removal.
Right.
The standard that I'm hearing a lot of council saying right now and articulating is it has to be something that, first of all, that there's a showing, a factual showing of clear and convincing evidence, number one. And number two, has to be of such a nature that is similar to the sorts of things that have already been delineated in our current charter and maybe consistent with what some of the other cities talk about, which would be, sexual harassment or conduct that's equivalent to something that would be a felony or whatever it might be. Whatever things you list would be, it's serious misconduct because it falls under one of these categories, and or that council is able to make a factual finding of serious misconduct based upon clear and convincing evidence. So there's some, to getting to what I think Councilmember Granville was saying, that there's specificity. That's not just you violated the code of conduct and therefore you could be booted. It's you violated the code of conduct and we specifically found that there's clear and convincing evidence that it is in fact serious misconduct. Something that requires more than just a subjective notion, but some objective finding that this looks and is in fact serious and not trivial.
Just follow up, Mayor. So with all that being said, where do we fall short with our city charter? And if someone has a code of conduct violation that is to the occasion of it's absolutely for certain that they violated the code of conduct, where do we fall short? The fact that we just can't remove that person?
The city charter right now, council member, is not tied to the council's code of conduct. And really the forfeiture of office comes from interfering with administration. For example, there are certain prohibitions that are laid out in the code. That's one of them. The other forfeiture of office would come from what's been discussed tonight, a conviction of a crime of moral turpitude. And then the being absent for 3 meetings without being excused. There's not an opportunity for the city council to remove or force forfeiture.
Vice Mayor?
I guess, my thought process is here is, me, I'm a very processy oriented person. And I worry that I do know in regards to everybody's like, oh, you're rushing it, but there is a time constraint in regards to if this is going to go on the November ballot, and I know that's kind of in front of us right now. I think my biggest concern is here we are having really good dialogue and discussion and coming up with some pretty reasonable ideas possibly moving forward, and regardless of what side, you know, people feel it. I feel like we're kind of cutting our residents short to be able to give us feedback and input into it before we actually have to make a decision, which would probably be next week. I mean, unless we have a special meeting before mid-July or whatever that cutoff date is. So I just say I think we need to be cognizant of that, because I think we owe it to the people that elected us to have some say into what those words specifically are.
Mayor?
Councilman Keating?
To Vice Mayor Redondo Savage's point, I think the election itself is their say into whether or not they approve this or not. Ultimately, we're asking the voters for the authority to set up a process. What we've all agreed on must be a fair and robust process with a very high standard of evidence. I really like what Andrew has suggested thus far. It sounds like there's a lot of consensus around it. So I would suggest that we take that consensus, ask staff to come back with something that we can vote on, vote up or down, and then let the chips fall where they may. Or amend, absolutely. It may very well be that we approve something to go onto the ballot and the residents say, no, this is not what we want, and they reject it. And there will be a campaign for and there'll be a campaign against, but the battle of ideas is going to happen between next week and the actual election day, as opposed to at this meeting, or it may be any, frankly, I'd be fine with the special meeting too. Sorry, Councilmember Shapiro. I'd be fine at the special meeting too to discuss this as well. But we are under a time crunch here, and we can't, Mesa's acted, Phoenix has acted, we can't wait 2 years to act on this.
Just a procedural question. I just want to make sure, in my last COW meeting that I have finally figured out the rules of this place. But a procedural question on the rules, Judy. Doesn't it only take 2 council members to put something on an agenda to be voted on? Mm-hmm. So if any 2 members at this table say that you give language, if you provide language to us and any 2 council members say, I want this to be voted on at the next meeting, it gets voted on, right? So we're not looking for a majority vote here. It's just 2 people.
Thank you, council member. This would need to come back to the whole of the council next week at a regular council meeting, and there could be amendments made at that time. We were hoping as staff to get your direction with respect to whether or not you wanted this to go forward, and if so, in what regard. There's an opportunity to say, only specific actions would result in penalties. You can specify which penalties, some of the things that you've already given direction on tonight. So.
Gotcha.
Okay, so
Councilman Keating?
while sitting here and keeping aside your very good suggestions, which I wholeheartedly approved of when I heard them, I was just looking back, and it's a consideration for an employment agreement for city manager. It wasn't you, but it was a little bit back in the past. There's some language here that really struck me, but what if we added to the charter the words, we include those, we have this list of things. So I'm trying to get the moral turpitude. Like the moral turpitude is essentially what we're looking for, but it's really not phrased in the right way. We don't have the tools. So what if you had something like clear and convincing evidence of acts that would constitute willful misconduct, fraud, corruption, or moral turpitude. So clear and convincing evidence of acts that would constitute.
I mean, Mayor, my concern with that is willful misconduct according to what standard? Mm-hmm. Who judges whether or not something is misconduct, right? Yeah. I was speeding. Was that misconduct? Yes. Mm-hmm. So was it willful? Sure. Is there clear and convincing evidence of it? Certainly. Can you remove me from the council for it, or should you be able to? Probably not.
Well, we could take out misconduct, willful misconduct, if that is too broad, but fraud, fraud has a legal definition, right? Sure. Corruption, quid pro quo, that has a legal definition. And moral turpitude is, obviously, it's a serious, there's an umbrella term there, it's not as specific as.
So clear and convincing evidence of acts that involve fraud.
Just the statement of clear and convincing evidence gives us the boundaries.
It does, but of what? Clear and convincing evidence of what? Clear and convincing.
She said willful, but in the end, I think it still comes down to the evidence. It comes down to the evidence that's produced, right? You have to be convinced by a supermajority that there's something that was serious that happened, I guess.
But the problem with the word misconduct is misconduct according to what? Misconduct according to, my mom says that if I don't have something nice to say, I shouldn't say anything at all. Misconduct. I just think, my point is that misconduct based on the law, misconduct based on the code of conduct, I mean, misconduct has to be referencing something.
The misconduct reference, you have the categories of things that would be the misconduct that would merit removal.
So willful or serious misconduct involving moral turpitude, fraud, corruption, period.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Clear and convincing, so we would have the authority to remove someone if there were clear and convincing evidence of someone committing willful and serious misconduct involving
Acts that would constitute
serious and willful misconduct involving fraud, corruption, or moral turpitude.
Mm-hmm.
I think corruption involves moral turpitude, but put both in there.
We add abuse to that as well?
Add what?
Abuse?
Like physical abuse, mental abuse,
Physical,
emotional
mental,
abuse?
yeah. You know, just abusive behavior. Specifically, I'm talking about sexual abuse, but we can talk about, you know, physical abuse as well.
Moral turpitude.
You're going to say abuse.
Moral turpitude, you're probably right there, so never mind.
Probably fits on a moral turpitude.
Yeah.
All right.
Are we there?
Is there
We obviously
consensus?
vote or not vote next week. for it.
Well, yeah, next week will be the hearing, and so is there consensus to have Judy create a document for us, outline what Andrew mentioned, including language that Lauren just mentioned?
We have time, yeah, we can beat it up again.
Okay. Was that clear?
I think so. I'll be happy to come back with a draft as clear as I understand it to be.
Lot of this dialogue.
I'll accept your direction at that point as well.
Yeah. All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That is so rushed, it looks bad.
All right, next item is any future agenda items?
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry, yes. I wanted to talk about the boards and commissions membership. A few months ago, in a Friday packet, we received information about the Transportation Commission and the Veterans Commission looking to amend their membership requirements. And in the language of the Friday packet, it said, if requested, ordinances amending the composition requirements of these two commissions will be placed on an upcoming regular council meeting agenda. And it got a little lost in the shuffle. And I can go into the detail of those recommendations from each commission. Should I do that? Or can we just put it on the agenda for June 28th?
What are they? Help me out.
Okay, sure. For the Transportation Commission, they decided November 14th, they wanted to amend the city code to the following language. The Transportation Commission is composed of 15 members who must be Tempe residents and who are appointed for a term of 3 years. 2 members may be non-residents, 1 who is affiliated with Arizona State University and 1 who works in Tempe. And the Veterans Commission on December 12th concluded that while it's good to have Tempe residents, there are key organizations that needed to be represented because they bring resources and services to Tempe. So they requested the following, and it's hereby, it's kind of more longly detailed, but there's hereby established the Tempe Veterans Commission to be composed of 11 members. The commission will include a member from each of the following existing U.S. military and veteran service areas, and then they're all listed. And there's 10 listings of each, or 11 different descriptions of the members. And it could all be detailed and put into the, it would be put into the resolution, right? Would it be a resolution?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. It would be a code text amendment, so it would require 2 hearings and then be effective 30 days
Two
out.
hearings.
Right. Okay.
I mean, if we can do that, if that's the consensus from, I think those recommendations came from the board and commissions?
Yeah, it came from the Veterans Commission and the Transportation Commission.
Can they give that direction here as a future agenda item or to place?
Well,
Fine with that, Mayor.
Does it have to do that?
Apologize. Was the direction previously given?
I don't know. I think it was recommendation. We need to get direction.
I think, let's see.
It was already on the agenda for August.
Isn't
To
it?
be
August? I think it,
9th. Is that a meeting?
Are we already planning on bringing that forward?
I thought we were.
Okay.
It was just, it was already, next step is requested, the ordinances will be placed on the upcoming agenda.
I thought August 9th, for some reason, rings a bell. Is that when our next meeting is?
Mayor and council members, would it be okay with the council if we were to take a little bit of time so that we could draft it and run it through
Yeah,
the ordinance
that's
review
fine.
committee?
That's fine. Okay. Anyone else have any future agenda items?
I do.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we're going to come back and finish.
Just have one item left.
We have 2.
No, we already did the.
We already did the pre-K one.
Updates.
Want to just power
All
through
right,
it?
let's go ahead, power through it.
Okay.
All right, next item on the agenda is going to be the committee of the whole items. Items written for city council direction or status update. We don't have any. The next one is new items for city council consideration. B1 is tobacco 21.
Sure, and this is me putting forward, although I'd welcome participation from any colleagues. And David, I'm sorry that you're not going to be here for this because I think this would be of particular interest to you. We do, when in talking about our memo, we always have to detail the strategic priority and related performance measure. In this case, we do lack a performance measure related to tobacco use in youth, but 1.21 performance measure addresses lowering rates of alcohol and marijuana use in youth. So we could add tobacco use to the measure for a more comprehensive approach to public health and teen health in particular. And you heard a lot from Dr. Fairbanks and Mr. Carpenter and Nicole Olmsted, but the Tobacco Control and Legal Consortium is a group that suggests that there's multiple policy benefits to raising the minimum sales age of tobacco products, including e-cigarettes, to 21. Number one, raising that age would likely lower overall tobacco use rates by reducing and delaying the onset of use. Number two, raising the age would likely reduce youth access and usage in particular. Number three, raising the age would simplify ID checks for retailers, because as you know, all of us, well, many of us know from having kids, the state driver's license, Arizona license it's a vertical frame, so that indicates if a driver is under the age of 21 in some way. So it makes it easy for the business to identify someone who's under 21. And I'm simply asking for, requests to look into this. There's a lot of issues I'd like to have a really rigorous approach and bring in the American Heart Association, Lung Association. Arizona's concerned about smoking, the American Cancer Society, other public organizations, ASU student groups, the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission. I'd like to be really rigorous in my approach and see what we can come up with. I know that there's 2 Arizona cities that have enacted tobacco 21 ordinances, and there's 300 cities and jurisdictions across the United States that have done it. And they've seen reductions in youth use of tobacco, and ultimately this is about the public health. So I would love to have the opportunity to work with staff on this issue, and expect it will take 3 to 6 months to come back with an ordinance.
Are there any questions?
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Granville.
So I'm in an interesting position with this, is that I'm of the opinion that sort of the role of government is to keep people from hurting each other, but not to keep you from hurting yourself, particularly when you're an adult at 18. So there's probably no version of this I would vote in favor of, but conceptually, I always think that a council member should be able to work on whatever their interests are. So I'm fine with this going forward, even though there's probably not a version I would support, but I certainly support, someone being able to work on something that's important to them.
All right. Vice Mayor?
You know what, just a couple things for me. I think, I kind of have to agree. I have a lot of grave concerns about trying to do this just within the city boundaries. And because I do know of the other 2 cities that have enacted it are more rural cities. So I think you've got to take that into consideration, first and foremost. And I think if it were something that we could do on a regional basis to get, our surrounding cities to agree and jump on board, I think that would be fantastic. And I agree. I mean, I think if there's some things that we can vet out, I really want to be cognizant, though, of our staff resources and time and the energy that they're spending. So I guess for me, it would be really hard for me to support something like this moving forward in the future. But I would say, though, too, in regards to those stakeholders, I don't see anybody on that stakeholder list that may have some concerns. So I think it would be good to get some of the businesses involved, the chamber involved. And I don't really know, too. I know one of the things that we've talked about, and I actually worked with Dr. Fairbanks when we talked about incorporating e-cigarettes back in the day. And I think you really have to define what e-cigarettes, vaping, and those type of businesses, too, because I think that's really important in regards to moving forward. And I think they mentioned it earlier about, is nicotine in in vapor, or is it not, or whatever it may be, and how you define that. So I definitely do have some concerns. I'd much rather see us address this maybe in a regional level, or maybe with the East Valley Partnership, or somebody that could actually bring more of the cities together, because the ones that, we maybe have seen some results are those rural cities, which makes complete sense to me. So anyway, that's my two concerns, because, I mean, really, it's just a few miles one way or the other, and people can go and get what they want. I get that. So for me, it's just a little concerning.
One of the things I want to make a statement if I can. First of all, I was on the council when we did the first smoking ban, supported Dr. Fairbanks, supported the e-cigarettes, supported the smoking in cars with children. I'm not a big fan of, I don't smoke, so I'm not a big fan of cigarette. I know it's harming. That being said, though, I want to hear from our police chief. I think she's still here. Because one of the things I look at is how would the enforcement look like? I mean, what are we even doing now with 18-year-olds enforcement? What would that mean? What does that look like? I look at this as, as the Vice Mayor mentioned, you can go 1 mile to the east, west, north, or south, and you can go to another city and buy it. It needs to be more, if something of this magnitude looks more of a regional approach. But the enforcement piece is something, I mean, so say we enact this ordinance, well then how are we going to enforce it? I mean, what's the point of an ordinance if you can't enforce it, or how are we going to do it? So if I could hear from our chief, one, how would something like this work for you in terms of enforcement? And two, what are we doing now currently with the there is a law that you cannot buy cigarettes if you're 18 or if you're under 18.
Yes, so Mr. Mayor and Council and Mr. Ching, I'm Sylvia Moyer, your police chief, and thank you for this opportunity to speak on this issue. I think anytime council directs staff to examine an issue where it may or may not involve the police department, we're a willing partner to examine the issue and to opine on what is best for our city. So what we currently have is an ordinance where the consumption, possession, or furnishing of tobacco to any person under the age of 18 is considered a petty offense. A petty offense argues that it is an offense for which a sentence of a fine only is authorized under Arizona revised statute. What that says is that we are not authorized to arrest for some of those offenses, but it does create a condition where the police department is placed in a spot to identify an individual and process them for the administrative fine. That would potentially create, based on volume, a certain amount of work for not only your police department, but for the courts that have to collect and administer the collection of those fines. I can imagine, and many of us can imagine, that the workload would increase with any distinction or inclusion of a greater population of people. There's likely to be an increase in the fines and the introduction of the police and the courts into collecting those fines. We currently have spotty and collaborative enforcement for offenses now for those under 18. But I can imagine that this would, out of the COW process, become something that we would take a more holistic approach to include an officer or a group of folks within the city staff that would address all of the issues related to youth health, whether it's tobacco, alcohol, or something like that. I think in conclusion, I could tell you that we are always willing to be at the table to examine the issues. And so there is my response for your consideration, sir.
Councilman Cubey?
In response to some of the points that you made, Vice Mayor, one about the rural issue. Yeah, the two cities in Arizona, or towns that have adopted Tobacco 21 are small, but there's 300 cities across the U.S. and New York City actually is a Tobacco 21 city. So it's not just rural cities, it's not just rural areas that have adopted it, and I don't think that would be a problem. And then talking about a regional approach, like, well, sure, I'd love this to be adopted regionally. I'd love this to be statewide, but that change happens very slowly, and Tempe has shown in the past, especially with its no smoking in bars and restaurants ordinance, that change percolates upwards, and we really impacted the rest of the state. And I would like to see that same thing happen in the state. Maybe it will, But to wait to get regional, acceptance, it's not really the legacy that we've had in the past, and I think that's a legacy that we're very proud of, that we kind of lead the way in some of these issues. This is fundamentally a public health issue. And then I want to say, too, that the Tempe Coalition, they've offered to work with the stakeholder group. They're working on the marijuana and alcohol performance measures, and they've offered to work with the group as well. And obviously, I do need to include the business interests and police and legal, too, in the study group. There's so much best practice information available that I don't think this will be a long-term work group. I think there's a lot. I mean, obviously, we want to get engagement of our citizens and have a forum and do the online forum, but there's not a lot of research that has to be done that hasn't been done already. There's so much academic and public health information about how early onset of smoking leads to addiction. So.
I just make a quick statement just to clarify. I just want to clarify, because I know you mentioned the Tempe Coalition. I am a Tempe Coalition board member, so I'm not I'm obviously very familiar with what their mission is, but I just want to say I am speaking for what I think is best for the residents of Tempe. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments? So is there a consensus to have a working group on this issue for Tobacco 21? Yes?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yep. Yes? Okay, there's consensus to form a working group.
Thank you.
All right. With that. Next is items in progress. Do you have any items in progress, council? Any of the council members on items C1 through 17? Councilman Shapiro.
It's the meeting where I get to pull myself off of all the work groups, right? So, yeah, I'm doing it. And the only person who said they wanted to have one of my spots on a work group was Randy really wants to be on the adaptive parks thing with you, Robin. And did you have one? Oh.
Yeah, that's all right.
What, do you want to be on that one too?
Yeah, but there'd be too many. That's all right. Oh, yeah, I'd like to.
Anyway, so.
Okay.
Bye, Robin.
Later.
Anybody else?
Everybody else. I also do want to comment that most of the work groups I've been involved in have finished their work. Hint, hint.
All right.
I like the process.
Seeing none, Mr. Manager, do you have any announcements?
Just actually one thing, the Housing First work group I know is going to report out. I just wanted to make sure that you understand that sort of parallel to the creation of that work group, we have been meeting, we being the East Valley City Managers, which includes Phoenix, Scottsdale, Chandler, Mesa, Apache Junction, Gilbert, the whole group there has been meeting to talk about homelessness and solutions to homelessness, and it's been a productive round of meetings. I think we've met 4 times since September of 2017. In our last meeting, we agreed that each of us would go back to our respective councils and just check in to make sure that as we begin the next phase of meetings, which is to talk about actual solutions that involve stakeholders, resources, locations, thinking about solutions involving housing and other types of solutions potentially for homelessness, that I have your blessing, if you will, to continue to represent that I am authorized to have that kind of conversation and talk, and obviously not commit, but at least to begin to have those conversations and bring information back to this council as ideas are being formed and plans hopefully come to some greater level of focus.
Yes, Councilman Keeving.
Just so we can take a trip down memory lane, the working group was formed May 5th, 2016, and since that time we've led efforts to inventory Tempe's affordable housing stock, identify the need, as well as hosting Tempe's very first homelessness town hall in conjunction with ASU. And we work with Mercy Maricopa on a program to house Tempe residents experiencing homelessness along with severe mental illness, SMIs. I think we've successfully housed half of our SMIs in Tempe. Kudos go to Kim Vanden Weeken, our homeless solutions coordinator. And then we did report back to council on the series of regional meetings that the city manager has led. So, and 6 months ago we said we wanted to take a hiatus while these meetings took place. And so as a result of all those recommendations, Human Services staff is going to be preparing information for council on potential next steps in an upcoming meeting regarding the regional approaches. So with that, we will disband the group.
Randy, you want to keep it?
What's that?
You want to keep the group?
Yeah, I'll stay on it by myself. I'm good.
Okay.
I don't.
We can remove the pigeons. We can remove pigeons.
Like I said, I'll continue to keep you updated.
Pigeons,
Yeah, it's on there still. Is it number 15?
14.
Yeah, pigeons can be removed.
All right. Anything else? No more? I just wanted to wish Councilman Shapiro good luck. Last committee of the whole, we still have one more meeting. I wanted to wish Councilman Navarro and Councilmember, or City Manager Ching, and all the dads out there, a happy belated Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day
And
to
to
you
you.
too, Mayor. And birthday. Happy late birthday. You're old
With
now.
that, we are adjourned.
How old are you? 49?
We have executive session, right?
Bye, thank you.